Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of Development Control Committee A at Mid-Suffolk District Council. Can I first of all just remind everyone some of the domestic arrangements for today? Can I please ask you to ensure your microphones are muted when you're not speaking and that you do not interrupt other speakers? Members are reminded not to use the messaging or chat function during the meeting unless it is to report a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest or to notify the chair that you wish to make a proposal. Members are reminded that they should not have alternative communication lines open, i.e. other team chats, and that if you are contacted by a third party during the applications, you should please bring this to the attention of our legal advisor. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt, you will be asked to leave. So we ask you please don't do that. Additionally, you'll be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair of the meeting by using the hands up function. And we will be using the e-voting for this meeting. If you're experiencing any poor connection issues, which I know some of us have this morning, in the first instance, please just try turning off your camera. If this does not work, maybe turn off all incoming video. These options are on the three dots at the top of the bar on the main information bar. Can I also please remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting is recorded and except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make any representations to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed and recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Just like to introduce some of the people we have here with us today. So we have Ian Deprez, who's our legal advisor. Good morning, Ian. We have Robert Carmichael, who's the governance officer. Morning, Robert. Philip Isbell, chief planning officer. Stephen Stroud, who's the strategic projects and delivery manager. Gemma Walker and John Pateman-G, who are the area planning managers. Then we have the case officers that we presented today, Bradley Heffer and Jasmine Wyard. So welcome to you. And I'm glad that we have Sam Harvey and Jason Skilton have joined us from Suffolk County Council's Highways and Floods team. The ward members for the applications are John Whitehead, Councillor John Whitehead, Councillor Tim Passmore, Councillor Mike Norris and Councillor Stephen Phillips and Councillor Daniel Pratt. You may not, at Mid-Suffolk District Council, the local councillors may speak on an item before them, but may not vote. Okay, I'm going to move to the agenda, please. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. I'll now ask the governance officer to roll call the members present.
Thank you, Chair. If members could just respond with their presence this morning. So, Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Present.
Councillor John Field.
Present.
Councillor Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Mansell.
Present.
Councillor John Matheson.
Present.
Councillor Richard Mayer.
Present.
Councillor Dave Muller.
Present.
And Councillor Tim Passmore.
Present.
We're all here, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 2 is to receive declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any that members wish to declare? If so, would you like to put your hand up? Okay, none received. Yes, sorry, Councillor Matheson and Councillor Field.
Yeah, for the sake of openness, etc. I do live in the in Needham Market, but I am at least half a mile away from the site and can't actually see it from here.
That's fine, thank you. And Councillor Field?
Fine, yes. Just that the Whitton area is in my county councillor ward.
Okay, thank you. That's both noted. Okay, agenda item number 3 is declarations of lobbying. I'm guessing we've all had the same. Councillor Mayer?
Yes, I've been lobbied on both.
Is there any member that, let's do it the other way, is there any member that hasn't been lobbied on both? No. We've all had lobbied on both. Okay, so that's for the record. Thank you
No.
very much.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't.
Yes.
I've only been lobbied on 7A, Councillor Eburn here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Eburn. Move on to agenda item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Are there any that members wish to declare? Nope. Okay. Next agenda item is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 20th of January. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes that members wish to raise? If not, could I ask for a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Muller, thank you.
Yes,
and could I have a thank you and a seconder? Is that Councillor Mayer?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. Governance officer will now conduct an electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if members could please go to the modern.gov app, where they will see the in the top right hand corner the plus sign, and please go to attendance/voting. And then we'll bring up the list. The vote is now in progress in a light blue bar across the screen. So we're just waiting on, there we are. So thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for with 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item number, the minutes of the meeting have been confirmed and they'll be signed off at the next practical opportunity. Thank you, members. Next agenda item is agenda item number 6, to receive the notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Have we received any, please?
None received, Chair.
Okay, well that takes us straight on to the schedule of planning applications that are before us today. The first item is DC 20-03704, land west of Old Norwich Road, Whitton, Ipswich. I now invite the case officer, Bradley Heffer, to introduce the application to committee. Bradley, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just share my screen so you can see my presentation. Can I just ask whether you can see that?
Yeah, we can see that
Right.
perfectly.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. This application is a reserve matters proposal for 190 dwellings on a site west of Old Norwich Road, Whitton. It's an application that came to you at the previous Mid-Suffolk A committee on the 20th of January and was deferred. This is an aerial map showing the site and the location in relation to the A14, which you can see on the left-hand side here, and the Old Norwich Road on the right-hand side of the site, basically sits in the middle. And to the top, we have Claydon, and there's industrial estate and retail area to the south of the site, and Whitton, which is on the edge of Ipswich in this position here. The constraints map shows there's limited constraints on the site. In all honesty, what it does show obviously is the black line that divides Ipswich from our district, and this abuts on its southern side, as you can see. There's also a listed building up in the top right hand corner, which is well away from the application site. The other heritage asset in the area is not actually shown here, but it's a conservation area which is actually located on this T-junction within Whitton itself, which is within Ipswich Borough. This is the red line application site that we're considering today. As part of the application that went to appeal, the application was approved at appeal, as you may recall from our previous presentation. There was a parameters plan that was identified by the inspector, which basically identified what could go where on this particular site. And this really has formed the basis of the discussions and the submission that's before you today. Just quickly to go through that, hopefully you can see the legend, which is on the side here, but that indicates roughly where the residential development would go. areas of strategic landscaping within the site, a large area of open space, and an area of access, a point of access to serve the development. I'd also draw attention to something which I didn't do last time, which is within the area of open space, it does specifically identify that Suds would be located within this area here. This is the site master plan of the Reserve Matters proposal, which basically interprets the plan you've just seen. And when this went to committee last time, members deferred consideration of this application in order that a number of issues could be looked at. These included triple parking provision, boundary treatment for a buffer area, the design of plot 1, the roundabout access proposal, chimneys, heating, pedestrian connectivity, and Suds details. And I'll go through these these issues in the order I've just identified. So starting first with the parking plan, the revised scheme which you have before you today shows the omission of all triple parking on the site, bar one instance, which is this plot here, and hopefully you can see that where there's triple parking. As I've said in the amended report, as I said in the revised report, if this is to be planned out completely, then that would mean that the whole of this area would have to be rejigged. And in terms of a response in planning terms, we were happy with that. We were happy with the way this works as Townscape. So we thought that that was a reasonable response and limiting that down to one particular element. The boundary treatments, I showed this plan before, and the reason I showed this before was to highlight the acoustic fencing that would be along the boundary here, because obviously it butts the A14 on the western side. But in terms of what's happened since the deferral, the landscape buffer now is an area that is completely contained. And you'll see this line here is close boarded fencing with a single point of access which would be locked. So that whole area would be basically locked from any access whatsoever. The other things to point out is that it's proposed as part of this overall permission that there would be a management plan in place where this would be maintained as part of the open space for the overall site. And I understand that discussions have taken place with local residents, and it has been agreed in principle that the sort of maintenance of this particular part would be reviewed every 2 weeks. So there would be a 2-weekly inspection of this particular part of the area so it can become a dumping ground. Although, as I've said in my report, it's so well overlooked, I doubt if that's likely to happen in any event. The other thing I understand is the case is that where you've got new dwellings that butt onto the landscape buffer, there would be an element within the deeds which would preclude owners or occupiers from creating gateways into this space from their gardens. So again, there's a further control. So it would literally be a landscape buffer that is completely contained. This shows the sections of the landscape area I've just been talking about, the landscape buffer. So you can see the new development here and here, the new dwellings, and basically in section you'll see fencing which would enclose the area we've just been talking about, and this is the position of the nearby residential development that exists on Old Norwich Road. The other thing that you can see on this drawing is the revisions that have taken place in relation to plot 1, which is basically handing the dwelling and the garage. Before the application came to you, the dwelling was roughly in the position where the garage is. That's been swapped over. The pitch of that garage has actually been lessened, and there is a drawing to show that further on in the presentation, but that's been revised in response. That organisation of that plot has been revised in response to members' comments. This is the junction detail which was presented last time, which shows the provision of a roundabout arrangement. And as I said before, this is the line of cyclist access through the junction heading north. There has been discussion about this with the Highway Authority since the deferral, and the latest version I understand of the discussions, you'll note, varies from the previous plan insofar as there's now a line for pedestrians to come, for cyclists travelling south, a separate line on the highway. So they've actually got their own carriageway there, or part of the carriageway, and also the crossing positions have been amended. So they've been pushed back further along the road, which I understand again is a response to safety concerns. But certainly the arrangement of the access you're being asked to consider hasn't changed. And as Chair advised, we have got highway engineers here who could advise you further on that if necessary. The permeability plan, which was discussed, one of the issues for deferral. This highlights the permeability. As I've said in my report, the A14 acts as a barrier really to permeability, that to the west, and to the north, the provision is along Old Norwich Road, public rights of way. The existing public right of way to the south is along this boundary, which is the shared boundary with Ipswich Borough, and you'll note that it's proposed to link through desire lines and routes across the open space in order to link through with that. And of course, there's the existing access, vehicular access, which pedestrians and cyclists can use, of course. This plan also shows pink lines and green lines where pedestrians can permeate through the site and not just follow the actual carriageways, the main carriageways. There is a permeable route through, which is something that we would support in planning terms. This is the landscape master plan. The reason I've put this one on there is primarily to show you, well, obviously the landscaping proposals for the overall site, but in terms of this issue, which was the drainage basin. The location of that, as I said before, in the parameters plan was identified as being as part of the parameters plan, and I think there are sound reasons, as I understand it, for locating the drainage in that, or basin in that particular location, because of the site topography. This plan here, this cross section here, gives you an idea of what's the current situation and what would be the situation in relation to the drainage basin if the development were approved. You'll note the red line here is the existing level of the land. The green line is the profile of the basin, and the blue line here is the worst case scenario modelling in relation to flooding. So, you know, in a 1 in 100 year biblical event, to give it a term, the basin could actually cope with that, and obviously the bunding would protect that from the nearest dwelling. I've got another plan which will show that in perhaps easier detail to understand. This is the a dwelling on Old Norwich Road, which you can see here, and the profile of the bund and also the line of the drainage. So again, in terms of the drainage, we're content that the location of the basin is in the correct position, and we're also content that the the way that the basin has been designed is able to cope with flooding events. The other thing I should point out, and has been something that's been mentioned in a number of representations, is this area here to the front of the site, which is prone to being waterlogged. It is an area of this particular site that does have certain level of standing water, and I know a number of residents are concerned that this element of the development could be exacerbated by the proposals to drain in this location here. I think that has been considered by our drainage engineer as part of the overall consideration of this proposal, and it's considered that this may have actually occurred at the time that Old Norwich Road went in, and so there was probably a backup created at some time, whereas previously the drainage would have gone across from that point to that point. Whether that's true or not, I can't give you a definitive answer, but in any event, this area here, notwithstanding the proposal to put the drainage basin in, it's felt that this would be this feature has been considered as part of that overall element. And indeed, in terms of the location, the landscaping proposals, it's the planting of this, the proposed planting of this, would reflect the sort of wetland status of that particular part of the site. I'll just go through these again. You've seen these drawings before, but they've been updated with the revised location, with the revised layout. This is the electric charging plan. The red dots are basically the dots that would be provided in each garage. There'll be infrastructure in order for residents to provide their own connection to electric vehicles. There's freestanding elements which are serving the shared parking areas, and there's also on these particular units here, there will be provision on the flank walls. The affordable housing plan, this shows the distribution of affordable housing. The blue units are affordable for rent, and the shared ownership are the redder units you can see there. But the distribution, importantly, has been improved since the initial submission, and has been agreed by the strategic housing team. The character area plan, briefly, this is to demonstrate that there would be a variety of character areas across the site. The lighter area, which is known as the street, would be the more formally arranged development, and the darker green would be the area where it would be less formal, looser arrangement. So there is that change across the site, which again we consider to be important in planning terms. These are updated street scenes. The things that you should note in particular to these is the lack of chimney features. There's no chimneys proposed on any of the dwellings now, and also in relation to this one, this does show the latest iteration of development on plot 1, and you'll notice the pitch of the garage has been dropped down. One of the other reasons for deferral was in relation to heating of the units. You'll have noted from the papers that they've put in a sustainability statement, which is basically identifying that the dwellings would be heated by gas, but also in terms of sustainability generally, they would follow a fabric first approach, whereby trying to design out heat loss and issues like that at the build stage, rather than adding things later on. That's not to say, of course, that later on occupiers couldn't add things like photovoltaic cells and things over time, which could probably be done in a lot of cases under permitted development. I'll quickly run through the house types. Where you do see chimneys, please ignore them because they've all been removed now. As you can see, it's a traditional architectural approach that's been taken on the site, which we think is wholly appropriate given the site context. There are instances of bungalows, single-storey development, so there is a variety of forms on the site. And just very quickly, in relation to plot 1, that is the unit that will be erected on plot 1. The only windows that would face towards plot 1 would be 2 windows on the flank elevation at first floor level, but they would both serve an ensuite and a bath, and therefore would be obscure glazed. So we're happy with that in relation to overlooking impacts. As you see, it's all fairly traditional design. This is a quick look down the road. Old Norwich Road. You can see we can't fail to notice the pylons, which are one of the key elements within the landscape. That's looking up Norwich Road towards the bus gate. And this is a sweep across the site. So you can see, or hopefully be able to perceive, the changes in level as you look towards, and we can see my dot there is towards the A14. Again, there's the pylons, and they will cross the open space provision rather than sit over proposed residential development. Sorry, I was on the wrong way. In the background there, you can see the northern boundary of the site, which is the existing band of trees. And that's the dwelling which plot number 1 would sit. Or the dwelling you can see here, plot number 1 would sit adjacent to that, roughly in that position. Again, another view of Old Norwich Road. This is a gap, as I said last time, this is a gap that's between 2 houses on Old Norwich Road and does offer access to the rear of the site, to the application site. It's not proposed to utilise this as part of the planning application. It's not shown within the red line. And if you recall talking about the buffer area at the back, this would be blocked off by close boarded fencing in this position as part of that overall contained area. There's a final view across the site, and that's roughly looking across where the access road would go in. So I'll leave you with the master plan. The other thing I would draw your attention to before I finish my presentation is the late paper sheet, which summarises some of the changes I've been talking about. I would summarise some of the discussions that have been taking place. Just to reiterate, there was an issue with archaeology, and that has now been resolved in terms of the approach that's going to be taken on the site. Affordable housing provision, the distribution of that has been agreed, as I said previously. And I think it's important to identify that the applicant has undertaken further consultation with councillors, parish and local residents following the deferral in order to discuss these issues. So they haven't just come in completely cold. I think that they have made attempts to actually, engage with local residents, which we think is particularly helpful. And lastly, rather than the summary of conditions, which was produced in my original report, if you look at the table paper, I've produced the conditions in full, so that you can be clear the ones we would recommend in the event that you were willing to accept the officer recommendation. But I'll leave it there, and obviously happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Can you just remind me how many triple parking places there were before and what it's gone down to? Because it's gone down to 1. What were the numbers before?
I think, Chair, it was about 30 or 33, 34.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Questions on the presentation today? Do we have anyone else? Yeah, we have some hands that are going up. Okay. I'm for some reason not getting any hands. So okay, so they're going up and I'm not getting them in the order, so I apologise. So I'll just go in the order I'm seeing, and I apologise if it's not the correct order. Councillor Sarah Mansell, then Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask the Suffolk County Council Highways representative a question, if that's okay. About the roundabout arrangement for cyclists. I would very much appreciate it if the highways officer is able to explain to me why they believe that a roundabout with a left turn lane specifically drawn on the road for cyclists is the best option to go on the National Cycle Network route, where the majority of cyclists will be going straight on along Old Norwich Road, effectively turning right. Thank you.
Sam, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Mansell. At the moment, the drawing is showing a a cycle lane onto the roundabout, but this can be shortened so as that anybody who wish to go forward straight on, they can obviously take ownership of the lane. As we know, with cycling proficiency, this is what we want to do when we are cycling to turn right or go straight on a roundabout. You do want to own your lane. So I can see your point about this lane being painted on. So this is something that we could reduce so as the cyclist feels that they have the ability to go into that lane.
I come back with a further question, if that's allowed.
Yeah, of course.
Was any consideration made to creating an off-road shared pavement bicycle cycleway thing approaching the roundabout, so that cyclists would if they're not confident enough to hog the right-hand lane of a roundabout, which many children might not be, they could actually go onto the pavement and have a dedicated cycle crossing on the spur road into the estate, and then back onto the pavement again, and then join the Old Norwich Road lane again further north. Was any consideration made to putting that in instead of the painted on line?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. This is something that we've been talking to the designers for during the Section 278 agreement. We were looking at whether or not there is enough room. Obviously, there's enough room on the south west side because that's within their ownership. The concern would there be enough length in the northwest side? But it is something that we are looking at to allow a cyclist to be able to get into a shared cycle route to use the crossing point and continue straight on. We've obviously discussed about having the route coming southwards, their own cycle route within sort of like a bypass, which is easy enough to do for the southbound, but we are looking at the northbound with our design for the detailed design for Section 278.
So this design that Bradley is sharing now, although we're being asked to agree this planning application, are you telling me that this plan is still subject to negotiation? In other words, we might not get what we see on the picture now.
It's minor details would be when we're doing the Section 278. This site has already gone through a stage 2 safety audit, so any changes would have to go through the audit again. But there are some minor details, as in we're looking at and exploring putting the cycling after the deferral, looking at putting cycling onto the footway. But when it comes to the detailed design, in principle, it will be what's shown on the screen, but there will be minor details that could change when we do the actual detailed design.
Which is standard. I mean, that happens on all applications. That's not unique to this. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bradley, for your presentation. I've got two questions, if I may. Firstly, was consideration given of having air source heat pumps, given that gas boilers are going to potentially be banned in 15 years' time? And secondly, with regards to suds and water retention, I understand the suds features have been modelled in relation to the 1 in 100 year rainfall event, but we're getting more of those at the moment. So is there a, what's the confidence rate really of that? Because it's the flood engineer says 1 in 100 year rainfall event, including climate change. And I'd have thought, and on this, there seems to be a lot of water retention on this area already. With the pressure of the existing houses, it's going to be far greater. So just the sort of confidence level of that 1 in 100 year comment. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Eburn. On the point of the air source heat pumps, in the papers that are part of the bundle now, I think that it does identify that the air source heat pumps were considered or have been considered by Bellways on a number of their schemes. And I think at this particular point in time, they've been discounted because they don't think that they're actually as practical in achieving what they want to do with regard to sustainability savings as the approach they're taking now, which is fabric first, but does include the use of the gas boilers. I mean, obviously they might be able to give you some more information on that, but that's certainly my interpretation of what's been provided. In relation to SUDS, as far as we can be certain and the advice we're being given, certainly we feel that the approach that's been taken here is the most appropriate for the site. But we do have, I'm mindful that that's probably not enough information for you. So we do have Jason Skilton here who perhaps can provide some more information in relation to that particular point, if that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Bradley. I think I would, because there's obviously existing issues, and then adding the houses on top, extra pressures. Thank you.
Jason, if we could bring you in, please.
Morning, Chair. Morning, Ben. So yes, so the design strategy for the surface water drainage meets national and local policy with regard to utilising infiltration on site. The applicant has provided infiltration test results, and they've actually provided additional infiltration test results to show that the soils are permeable in that location. As Bradley Heffer did point out as part of the appeal, we are limited where we can actually put the surface water drainage features. So we've had to utilise the best use of the land with the constraints both from the appeal, the overhead power lines, gas main, and also the topography. With regard to the design standard of the 100-year plus climate change, what national planning policy, the non-technical guidance says, is there should be no above ground flooding in the 1 in 30-year event and no off-site flooding in the 1 in 100 plus climate change. Now, what the applicant has actually done on this is actually designed to a higher standard so that all the water will be retained on site for the 1 in 100 year plus climate change. What we also do as part of the technical standards is the applicant has to provide various safety measures with regard to the hydraulic calculations, and they also provide an additional volume of storage called freeboard on top of the 100-year plus climate change water level.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Philip Isbell, I think, did you want to come in on a point just been made?
Just to go back to Councillor Mansell's point about cycling, if I may, Chair, and apologies I won't take. I mean, it's important to bear in mind this is a reserve matters application, so we are dealing with details rather than a planning application per se. And obviously, the conditions that we've recommended to you today are in addition to those which are listed in the appeal decision, which is in your bundle. In terms of what's being described around the cycling navigation around the roundabout, I mean, I think it's also important, as Councillor Mansell will know, the advice of British Cycling and other organisations is very much for cyclists to dominate the lane so that traffic is aware of them and slowed down. So there's a definite advantage to that. If members consider there's something to explore around the provision of cycling, a cycling space adjacent to the crossing, that seems to me within the territory of a condition on the reserve matters consent rather than something that needs to trouble the committee for a prolonged period. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go back to questions, and next up I have Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad the floods engineer's here, because that was also my concern. Could we look at that cross section that Bradley put up, showing the sustainable drainage basin? Because it looked to me as if the existing house in the old Norwich Road was actually lower, and so I really wanted to be absolutely sure that the water from the new development is actually going to not go to flood the house, but to go into the basin. I'm sure these things have been thought about, but it does actually look that way. There was another one with a line showing the levels. Yeah, that one. That's the one. Yeah, that existing, can't quite see it. neighbouring house. I'm not sure which house that is on the Norwich Road, but that one looks at risk on the section.
Jason, do you want to come in just on that particular point?
Certainly can. Morning, Councillor Masterson. So with regard to this is a reserve matters application. So we're actually looking at the from our perspective, we're looking at the location and landscaping. The actual exceedance routing, as we would term it, with regard to the basin and where it would flow out, would be considered as part of the discharge of conditions, which we're currently looking at the moment. The exceedance event would be, of course, greater than the 1 in 100 year plus climate change, and the additional freeboard that's been built into the surface water drainage design. So what that means in reality is it would be a truly biblical event to actually make this basin overtop. The flood exceedance route would be directed away from any existing properties or any new properties, and would be looking to discharge into what we call safe locations.
Okay, thank you
very much. Okay, Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to stick with the same subject, but a couple of questions. Looking at that profile plan, the base of the house sits at 35.2 metres, and the base of the water in the basin, not the top of it, the bottom of the basin, sits at 35.2 metres, and the land surrounding is up at about 36, and the top of the water is at 37. I always thought water ran downhill, not up. So can I ask, presumably the rest of this site is substantially higher than the drawing we're looking at. I'm sure that must be so, but it could be confirmed. The question really next is about the water table that sits below that ground level. I'm informed that those houses suffer from problems such as their current sewage arrangements, cesspits filling up with water, and that has been getting significantly worse of late. I just would like some reassurances that you're aware of where the water table is, and that you have that all correctly engineered. So I think that's the questions for Jason. I do have one other question, which you really...
should we take those?
Then we'll come back to you,
then we'll come back to you, John.
Morning, Councillor Field. So with regard to, as I said, this is a reserve matters application, so we're predominantly looking at the landscaping and location of that. The groundwater levels have been looked at, and they would be what we call below the minimum unsaturated zone from where infiltration would take part. So the Environment Agency and Syria Suds Manual both have a differing figure that there should be what we call an unsaturated zone below any infiltration designs of at least a metre. Groundwater monitoring has been looked at on this as part of the boreholes, and has been shown to be significantly deeper. With regard to historical cesspits, you'll be finding that most of those have actually been dug deeper than modern infiltration devices, and hence probably why the local residents are suffering from groundwater actually coming into those old cesspit designs. That's why on modern cesspit designs, and I'm not an expert, they're generally a lot shallower than they are back in sort of predate the sort of the 1990s.
Thank you.
Philip, did you want to come in on that point before we go back to John for a follow-up question?
No, Chairman, actually, no. It's an old hand. I should have taken that down.
Right, no problem. Okay, John, back to you.
Right, just the one other thing is about the discussion of heat pumps and fabric first. I was just going to question the way it was said. It implies that fabric first precludes the use of non-fossil fuel methods of heating houses like heat pumps. I thought fabric first just meant you adequately insulate the place and provide perhaps things like triple glazed windows, but that there's still considerable freedom as to how you might choose to heat it. Am I wrong?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Field. I think that what I was trying to badly answer last time was the fact that as part of the overall approaches to sustainable heating and development, the use of air source heat pumps has been considered, not just on this development, but it's been considered on other developments by the developer. But they have chosen to actually not use that technology at this point. That's not to say, I assume, that they wouldn't consider that in the future, but I think within the papers there's an explanation as to why they think it's not appropriate to use that at this particular time, and why they think that the heating method that they're using now, which is the gas methodology, is the most appropriate. But as I say, I'm not sure there's much more I can say on that particular point.
John, you could always ask the applicant when they...
Okay, I'll think of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry to go over old ground again, but I am concerned about this Suds. And my question is, the current location for the Suds, am I right in understanding that that has been selected, A, because the inspector said it ought to go there, and B, because there are power lines over the top? Is there anything preventing that Suds moving further down towards the road where it wouldn't threaten the house? Because it's all very well to say it's once in 100 years, but if you're lying in bed when there's a thunderstorm outside and you know full well the Suds is filling up, you'd have trouble sleeping, wondering whether, is this the 100-year event that's going to see my house flood? So is there no scope for that Suds to move further towards the road?
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, sorry, Jason. Just in terms of the principle, to reiterate, the plan that was shown, the parameters plan did identify that a Suds feature would be going in this location as part of that. And as I say, I think the actual final location of that, and it's something that's picked up, discussed previously, is the topography of the site, the way the site works. Because I think that in terms of the topography, there's A14 at the top, it does fall this way, but it also falls this way. So therefore, this is the higher ground, this is the lower ground. And in terms of an infiltration and Suds location, this would be deemed, unless Jason has got another view, to be the most appropriate location for that basin to be located. But I'll wait to hear what Jason says.
Is it not true that towards the bottom of the site, we were told that tends to flood towards the road? Does that not suggest that's downhill?
Well, I think that yes, the site does go this way. It falls this way, but it also falls this way. So it's not just a simple curve that way, and this is on higher ground than this. I understand that the actual topography works so that it is in the lower location. But in terms of this area here, as I said before, I think that prior to this development being proposed, historically there's always been an element of wetland, if you can call it that, at the frontage of this site. And what has caused that, I don't think it's been entirely established, whether it's the way that this road has actually blocked the drainage route, traditional drainage routes or historic drainage routes across the land, falling that way, south east, or whether something else has actually occurred here. But there is a wetland location here. But in terms of whether this bowl should be in this location here, as I say, I'm given to understand from the investigations that have been taking place up until this point, which has been over a long period of time, this is the most appropriate location for that particular feature. But as I say, I'll wait to hear what Jason says.
Thank you, Bradley. Morning, Councillor Mayor. So, yeah, as you rightly pointed out, we do have some various constraints set on us with regard to the location of the bays and the topography, the overhead power lines. There's also a gas main that runs partly through the site, and also what the planning inspector decided is the allocation of the land. The other factor that actually dictates where the infiltration basin goes is actually the test results from the soaking test that was undertaken by the applicant. So the applicant undertook a number of infiltration tests, both at the outline application stage and additional testing that I've asked for. And actually, the location of the basin is based on where the best infiltration rates are present. Now, with regard to the wet area in front of the Old Norwich Road, historically there's been some ambiguity over why it's been wet. There's been reports that there has been historically leaks from possible water supplies. There may be the damming effect of the building of the Old Norwich Road, which has caused the water not be able to take its natural flow path across the site. But with regard to the basin, it does naturally is naturally in an area that would capture the water from the higher land.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Mayor?
Oh, only to question. We've been driven by a planning inspector who is he a drainage engineer? Was it, would if he have had all the information that's available now when he made that, or she made that decision?
Chairman, can I come in on this? So inspectors rely on the evidence provided to them, Chairman. And if you look at the appeal decision, which is in your bundle, you can obviously see the range of issues that they in particular considered. And I think within that, you'll see there's quite a lot of consideration given to surface water drainage. Now, I don't know, just looking at the qualifications of the inspector, they're not given, but I believe Philip Major, who was the inspector, is a planner rather than an engineer by trade. And he will have relied upon the evidence and advice given by witnesses at the time. And that would have been given on the best of available information at the time the public inquiry was heard in 2019. So my instinct is that there was a thorough analysis of this issue, which led to the expectation there be a surface water drainage scheme, which is set out, I think, in conditions 18 and subsequent conditions on that decision. So there was consideration given to it, Councillor, and it was the best consideration that could be given to an outline application on the information at that point in time. And any applicant can then, or any developer can then rely on this outline permission as having established that principle. And as with all things in planning, we must make the judgments we make on the days that we make them. And hindsight is always 2020, and one cannot be certain that hindsight is necessarily going to prove anything either way. I think at this point we have a technical specification and we have a design solution, and we have to expect that to work on the balance of probability rather than beyond reasonable doubt. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful to other members for also looking closely at this issue. I was firstly going to ask, but I think it's been answered now, as to where this major leak described on page 39, paragraph 8.4, where that was. And I think we've heard that it's the dark green patch beside the road down there. And then, as I understand it, the inspector has only said that the drainage basin should be in this area, which was to be left undeveloped, not more specifically than that. But where does the basin drain out to? Where's the water course in this area? I'm not familiar with the area sufficiently. Just trying to really understand this, because I think there is, we are discussing a risk here, which we ought to try and minimise.
I can come in, Chair. Councillor Matheson, they're actually using infiltration, so it's not a discharge to a watercourse.
Oh, right. That's useful. I understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. All right. Next up, We don't have a representative from the parish council, I understand. So we'll now move to the objector, Stephen Bates. Mr. Bates, if you'd like to turn your camera on and your microphone on.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if your camera hasn't come on yet, but it's probably does say it's a slow. There we go. Okay, welcome.
I think we've called up. Yeah, are we all good?
We're all good. So Robert will be timing. You have 3 minutes, and if you could keep to the 3 minutes, please. Over to you.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Since the committee's unanimous decision to defer this application last month, for the many reasons discussed, we find the application back before us largely unchanged. I would at this point like to thank Bellway Homes for their consultations with myself in the interim period, which have resulted in satisfactory resolutions to both the buffer zone and the plot 1 issues. However, there appears to have been no movement at all on the other 2 issues, which continue to gravely concern the residents, despite the many ideas and compromises that we have offered them. With this in mind, I come before you to raise these serious concerns once more. 1, there will be a considerable SUD system put in place on the southern boundary of the site. This is directly above several low-lying properties on Old Norwich Road, whose properties already lie level with the existing water table. Even a fractional increase in this water table will have a catastrophic result for these residents. We would like to thank Bellway Homes for their drainage strategy non-technical summary, which I understand the committee also has a copy of. Unfortunately, this does nothing to alleviate the fears of these residents, as it clearly shows all water from the site draining to the rear of their properties and into the wetland adjacent. This will be protected simply by earth mounds, and we simply cannot comprehend how this will not raise the water table in this entire area as feared. If Bellway Homes or the Environment Agency are so confident in their drainage designs, all we ask is that you provide guarantees to the affected residents that should their properties be flooded in the future years, they will be properly compensated or protected. Secondly, we remain baffled by the decision to build a roundabout at the site access. It still makes no sense whatsoever to us, either in terms of road safety, cost or pollution. As it stands, the northbound entrance to this roundabout will service just 6 houses and 2 buses. An hour, hardly the typical requirements for a roundabout. There are numerous safety concerns we have with such a junction, such as cycle safety, access to the adjacent livery and existing residential driveways just a few metres away from the roundabout, to name but a few. Hopefully somebody from Suffolk Highways is present, and I know they are now, who can explain exactly why a roundabout is so important to them as to reject all other seemingly safer and cheaper road layouts in favour of the proposals we have before us. Furthermore, I would challenge Suffolk Highways to commit to a reduction in the speed limit on Old Norwich Road and an improved traffic enforcement system at the bus gate, as the current system in place is laughable. And please do not insult our intelligence by offering more signage as a mitigation policy, as this clearly has not worked to date and will not in the future. Finally, the residents directly to the side of the site entrance are quite elderly, and with this development scheduled to last approximately 5 years, that will likely be the rest of their natural lives. I would therefore ask the committee to ensure that a sympathetic management plan is created and strictly enforced to ensure the minimum noise impact possible to these residents. Thank you for your time today, and I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Members, any questions? I've got a question that I'd like to I'll ask the applicant based on something I've just heard. So thank you for that. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, for your submission. First, just could you tell me what the speed limit is on Norwich Road? And secondly, recently we've had a lot of rain. Which obviously is becoming more and more of a common occurrence. Can you tell me what flooding issues there may or may not have been in the last month for neighbouring properties to this site? Thank you very much.
So is that question directed at me or?
It is indeed, yes.
Indeed,
Please,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's currently national speed limit on Old Norwich Road at the moment. It goes from 30 to national speed limit pretty much at the Ipswich boundary. So as we switch from Ipswich to Mid Suffolk, there's a national speed limit, which is nonsensical really, but there you go. Currently, in terms of the flooding issues, well, the deemed wetland area, I would say to you, is currently roughly ankle deep as we speak, and it has been really, we have sent photographic evidence of that in truth into the planning officer, but it's ankle deep at the moment and has been probably for around about 2 months now. I would actually just say, because there's been a lot of questions about the Suds and this Old Norwich Road, so can I just add, there are dry ditches to the
Can I just
east.
say, I'm afraid you can only answer questions that are asked of you after the 3 minutes.
Okay. Does that answer the questions then?
Yes, thank you very much. And Chair, may I ask
Yes, please.
Sam Harvey from Highways, presumably if the roundabout treatment goes in, there will be the appropriate speed limits that need to happen with a roundabout.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Eban. Just I'd like to confirm that the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, the proposal is to extend it to the bus gate so as that the whole scheme is within a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit and the site will be a 20-mile-an-hour.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Matheson for you.
Yeah, it sounds as if I need to ask Mr. Bates what these dry ditches that are doing. That are you say they're dry ditches, but there's an ankle deep water at the moment. I didn't quite understand the relation there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for asking that question. Yes, to the other side of Old Norwich Road, there are existing dry ditches in place. Evidently, it seems to me that what's happening is the water is being stopped by Old Norwich Road. There is no culvert underneath, and therefore the ditches that were and remain in place but are now dry just simply aren't being used because the water can't drain away. That land is owned by Ipswich Borough Council as well, so there is an opportunity, I think, to actually resolve the problem here.
So if I may, Chair, it sounds as if perhaps there's something as simple as a pipe under the road that's got blocked, which Mr. Skilton might like to ponder on after the meeting.
Okay, your question, Councillor Matheson. We're in questions.
No, it's been answered now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Field.
Rather similar question. I must confess, just looked at the Ordnance Survey profiles for the area on RS mapping. Clearly the land is lower to the eastern side here, and I was about to ask Highways or Jason, what investigations have been undertaken to check why this area is flooded. It may not have been an issue in the past, but it clearly is now. And the Norwich Road, to my knowledge, has been there, 50 years? It's not exactly a new thing. So we're not being out of time to get these investigations done. Have we considered anything?
Jason or Sam, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Field. It would be up to the applicant to look at the drainage under the old Norwich Road. If there was a culvert that's been installed in there to drain the land, it would be a mixture of different landowners' responsibility to make sure that's maintained. Historically, when these roads were built, there were culverts put underneath of them. So it could be that there is a culvert there. It hasn't been identified by the applicant as being a culvert present at the moment. But if it is, it's likely to be the highway authority's responsibility to keep that culvert managed and maintained in perpetuity.
Sam, are we aware of one there at all?
Sorry, Chair. No, I'm not aware of that. I'm afraid I can't find anything on our system at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for the objector? Councillor Passmore.
Thanks, Matthew. I know I'm a ward member, can't vote, but one of the things I was going to say, just to inquire, is it possible to put this as a under reserved matter? And I think it was Mr. Bates said some sort of guarantee to look at the drainage, because we could have a protracted conversation toing and froing, but that to me would summarise all the issues that have been quite rightly been raised, and that does need to reassure the residents.
I think I've got that on my list to ask the applicant when the applicant comes forward.
Okay, thank you.
And then we can take it from there.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I shall go now.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we don't have a supporter, so I'll now ask the agent, Laura Dudley-Smith, to speak. And I understand that Sarah Cornwell and Joel War are also here to answer questions. So if I could ask the agent to turn your camera on, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, and welcome. And again, if you could keep to 3 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. Thank you for allowing us to present to you again this morning on behalf of Bellway. Since you last considered this application on the 20th of January, Bellway Homes have been working with their project team, as well as local residents and the parish council, to address the 8 issues raised as reasons for deferral, and can therefore now provide the following update. All instances of triple parking have been removed, apart from one down a private drive and near visitor parking, where it was unavoidable without a significant redesign of the scheme. We have liaised further with neighbouring residents to provide reassurances that the landscape buffer area to the rear of existing dwellings along Old Norwich Road will be one single area and appropriately secured and managed. Again, through further consultation with neighbours, Plot 1 has been revised to move the 2-storey dwelling 9.7 metres from the rear boundary of the old filling station instead of 3.5. A single-storey double garage provides this separation, and the roof pitch of this has been reduced as requested by and in agreement with the neighbours. Bellway Homes cannot be expected to take forward an access proposal that cannot be supported by the Highways Adopting Authority, Suffolk County Council. As such, we have proposed further improvements to the roundabout arrangement to ensure a level of safety for all users, including cyclists, that goes beyond that already considered acceptable by Suffolk County, and agreed these with their officers. This includes additional road marking, improvements to the existing cycle lanes, a reduced speed limit all the way up to the bus gate, and a segregated roundabout bypass for cyclists travelling southbound. There will be no chimneys constructed anywhere on the scheme. Bellway shall be maintaining their use of gas boilers whilst there is no policy or building regulation to require otherwise. Bellway do, however, offer exemplary sustainability credentials in other ways through their fabric-first approach to construction, for example. This means that the priority is to reduce energy usage in the first place through means such as building orientation, airtightness, glazing and insulation. Bellway strive to achieve 10% over building regulations, energy efficiency requirements, and will be providing electric vehicle charging connections for all residents. A full sustainability strategy for the scheme has also now been submitted. Additional information has been provided to demonstrate how opportunities to connect to the existing public rights-of-way along the southern boundary of the site will provide enhanced pedestrian connectivity, and to link to the new internal network of footpaths across the public open space. The drainage strategy has been informed by the existing site conditions and topography, and has been approved by Suffolk County Council as the lead local flood authority. Further discussions with county officers have taken place, and additional information has again been provided to all to clarify how the proposed system will operate. An underground pipe network combined with landscaping bunds around existing dwellings will ensure a betterment to existing surface water conditions. The basin will be managed in accordance with a maintenance and management scheme agreed with Suffolk County and Mid-Suffolk planning officers. We trust that this clarification is helpful for your further consideration of this scheme and allows for a favourable determination. And as you said, I'm happy to take any questions, and also supported by Sarah Cornwell of Bellway Homes and Joel, our site engineer. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Mayor, you're first off.
Thanks, Chair. Laura, thanks for your statement. As I understand it, a gas combi boiler is significantly smaller than an air source heat pump and associated cylinders. Given the small size of some of the properties you intend to put on this, is the size of the heating system being part of the considerations by Bellway Homes in selecting the gas combi boiler?
I think it's a factor, but that's combined with a number of factors. So at the moment, obviously, there's we've had in the sustainability strategy recently submitted, so everyone can refer to that if needed. They undertake an appraisal of the use of air source heat pumps and kind of weigh up the pros and cons. Obviously, there are pros to them as systems, but at the moment there still remains cons where it ultimately they're not sort of by. And Bellway have an overall energy strategy, as referred to, in terms of how they work their homes in terms of the efficiency, fabric burst and things like that. And so to introduce the air source heat pumps into that will require a significant rehaul of that strategy, and for the homes and the house type and things will be designed differently to accommodate those uses. So it's certainly, it will be something that Bellway will have to consider in the future, but at the moment, until until it's enforced through planning policies and building regulation requirements, it's a significant requirement for Bellway to take on.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You talk about designing the buildings. My concern is that you put in a combi boiler, which is nice and small and compact, and then leave the residents to pick up the cost of rebuilding the properties to accommodate a heating system in the future. Now, that may well be compliant with existing policy, but it's hugely disappointing that the developers are leaving their future residents to pick up the cost of a design specification that could be done now. We could design that in now and make those buildings capable of going on for many years to come. So whilst I doubt whether we have any ability to enforce heat pumps, it is hugely disappointing that they're not being designed in at this time. Thanks.
Thanks. Just to be clear, we are at this point just asking questions, and we get into debate shortly on the merits. Councillor Field.
Just to repeat my question, I guess I think it may have been answered more or less, but the point was that fabric first is obviously something which one appreciates as a good direction of travel, but my assumption is that doesn't actually preclude you putting in sustainable means of heating, i.e. probably air sourced but possibly ground sourced heat pumps. Just like that confirmed. The second point perhaps is there are clearly government grants at the moment that provide a continuous payment for people using sustainable heating methods. Is that available to people on new build? I.e. if you installed heat pumps, do those people then get a payment from the government every year, as I would have done had I upgraded my house, or is that something that's not available to new residents? Thank you.
Yeah, I can come back on those. I think no, you're right. Obviously, the use of fabric first doesn't preclude the use of heat pumps solely. It's simply, I suppose, that the way Bellway have operated to date is that that's the priority, because that using the use of fabric first initiatives such as insulation, glazing, and the overall building efficiency is the starting point that sets the baseline, regardless then of how the energy is sourced beyond that and what's used. So their priority is to reduce the amount of energy used before you then consider where that energy comes from. In terms of the grants, I probably wouldn't be best placed to advise in terms of how the specific specifics of how those grants will operate, or will in the future. I suppose I would just add, though, that in addition, that our sustainability advisors are aware of the intentions to be providing grants in the future for any conversions of technologies or things like that as well, and that would of course obviously apply to these residents amongst all others. And so I think in terms of the queries raised previously on the requirement for residents to undertake those costs themselves, it would be envisaged that they would be no more unreasonable to anyone else with an existing gas boiler.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Matheson. Sorry, Councillor Mayor, did you want Councillor Matheson?
Right, thank you. Yes, previous councillors have covered a good deal of the ground, and really I'm just left wondering why the agent thinks that other mass housing developers are coming to us with air source heat pumps as standard, but Bellway still. I mean, I have read your AES consultants report in detail carefully to just try and understand what the argument was, and really why are others doing air source and why are you still going for gas?
So that's, from my position as agent, I can only sort of simply advise that that's the chosen strategy of Bellway Homes at the moment. It's it's appraised in terms of across all areas, and that's been the decision they make ultimately. We do have Sarah on the call from Bellway Homes specifically if there's anything else she has to add on that, if she wants.
Is there anything you want to add, or has enough not getting a hand up?
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I suppose just to add that it is something that we're looking at. It's something as a group, Bellway are looking at. As you know, it's not building regulations at the moment. We are trying to get ahead of the game, but it's something that it needs a lot of investigation. It needs a real redesign of the internal spec of a lot of the houses. So it's not something that we can just on a whim do. It takes a lot of technology, and we're still at the early stages of that. So in a couple of years' time, I'm sure we'll be there, but at this stage, we just aren't now with the technology, unfortunately, in the design of our house building programme.
Right, I'm sure we'll return to that in the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry to labour the point, but the sustainability report says, their own report, heat pumps are a relatively mature technology. So I just, can you confirm, one, that, can it be re-looked at is the question to that? And secondly, you did mention about all the other aspects of sustainability, including orientation. Can you explain which houses are planned out according to the orientation of the site in terms of solar gain? Thank you very much.
Okay, so yes, the technologies may be mature, but they're not mature in terms of we haven't been using them on a site-by-site basis. So there have been the odd schemes, we've used them. I think we used it at our Barking scheme, and there was a lot of problems with it, and we've actually taken it out now, is my understanding. So it's not something that we can generally just retrofit our properties to do. It will take us a while to get to the technology within our build programme. What was the other question? Sorry. So orientation.
Orientation, solar gain. Thank you.
I couldn't be specific, to be honest with you. It's something that the architect will look at as he's redesigning the buildings and the layout. Obviously, we had to fit in with the outline planning permission and the parameters plan that was set out there. So the housing has to be in a certain position in terms of where the roads are as well. But I couldn't tell you on what plot by plot basis, unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I may. Yes, just to go back over that point, and I fully understand and I recognise where members are coming from with this question of the interest in heating. It is important to remember this is a reserve matters application. The principle of this development is set. Reserve matters include access, appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale. They do not, on the face of it, include the internal arrangements for heating the buildings. That would have been a thing which, were it to be relevant to a planning matter, should have probably been covered at the outline stage. So I think we have to be careful in handling how we approach that. And for similar reasons, clearly there are a number of conditions on the outline permission, and we are discussing Suds, and that clearly relates to landscaping and perhaps to some degree to layout, but there are other conditions which manage and govern that. So we do have to respect the fact that any developer, whoever they may be, is entitled to rely on the existence of an outline permission, and we don't have the luxury of revisiting that. Thank you, Chairman.
I guess my question is, we've heard the concerns of the neighbours around the Suds and the location. We've heard from the floods team why it's in that location. It does seem that is probably the best location. But what sort of comfort can we give the residents who are just in front of that location, in terms of, we often hear 1 in 100 years, and then a year later we hear that actually we've just had the flooding in 1 in 100 years, or one in a biblical event, and suddenly we're told, well, that wasn't expected, but it was a biblical event, and it seems to be happening more and more. So I'm just wondering, the Suds system is going to have to be maintained, it's going to have to be operated. How can we put something in place to give the residents that confidence, those particular residents located right in front of it?
So I think, as you suggest, it feels to me as the sort of the best avenue for that is through the management and maintenance schemes that are proposed. So there's, in terms of the specifics for the Suds Basin, we have been required under the conditions for the outline application, we have to provide details for Suds, the management and maintenance of the Suds assets in particular, but also the Suds Basin as a landscaping feature falls under the landscape management plan as well. So that's the same management plan that we've referred to in terms of the management of the landscape buffer area, for example, which includes checks of I think at least every fortnight across the site, general rubbish clearance, things like that, and obviously the nature of them going out to site and undertaking that maintenance. All existing residents, and we've suggested that all new residents, and we've suggested existing residents that they could also have them, would obviously be provided with the details of that management company and the appropriate contacts in that regard. Also, of course, the Suds Basin itself will be kind of an adopted asset of Suffolk County Council, registered on their system as well. So there is a kind of secondary sort of inquiry or kind of complaints procedure is there.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that would be after the event.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if this is within planning. So Philip or Brad, you have to tell me if I'm going way off the mark here. But, you can get a one-off indemnity insurance that someone takes out over the lifetime of something to prevent something happening. I mean, they're not hugely expensive, but you have a once-off indemnity policy you buy to protect those houses, which is just sits there in case anything were to happen in the future. I mean, my view is those residents need some sort of comfort, but I don't know if that's within planning, if it's even permissible. But Philip, you'll tell me if I've gone way off track here.
Heaven forbid, Chairman, heaven forbid. It's usually a matter of private law, if I'm really honest, and I know that's a very unwelcome kind of answer. I think the important point is that we make sure that the surface water management plan, as far as reasonably possible to the standards we'd expect across the county, does this in a way which we would expect for our own properties as anybody else's, I guess. I don't think we can require an indemnity. I don't think that's a reasonable step for a planning authority to take. I fully understand, and you can obtain them, I'm sure, for these things, but that's a civil matter, and I wouldn't suggest we have the opportunity to do that. What we do have is the opportunity to sign off on a reasonable surface water management plan, and that's a point where the planning authority will be guided by the advice and experience, in other cases, of the flood authority, Chairman.
Let's come back then. So 5 years down the road, Philip, when this is, or 10 years down the road, when this is built and the houses have been there 5 or 10 years, how can we know that the management will be ongoing to protect the residents that are already there? Because often with these things do slip a bit over time, and that's my worry. In the first, over time, the management it relaxes a bit. Things are established, eyes taken off the ball. So it's that long-term confidence for those residents, I think, is what I'm after, rather than, I'm sure in the early years everything will work, but it's the long-term comfort.
Well, Chairman, I mean, I'd probably look to a little input from Jason and on the flood authority side of this. I understand what you're saying, and it's not unusual for some matters to become less important. But clearly, flooding is a long-term interest for the flood authority. the county as flood authority has a long-term commitment to the county to manage surface water and flooding incidents, and we are, as planning authority, involved in discussion with them and with others about experience across the county. So a long-term management plan, which is effectively for the lifetime of the dwellings, is what's essential here, because the surface water issues will arise for that duration. So this isn't a 5-year landscaping plan where if people don't plant the plants or some of them die, we just say, oh well, that happened. This is drainage, surface water drainage, and the ability to manage unexpected events is a very real and a very challenging construction detail, which needs to be dealt with here and now, because we have one opportunity to get this right, and the inspector provided that in a surface water management plan condition to ensure that's surface water and stormwater is managed. He didn't set a time limit on that. He didn't say that was for 5 years or 10 years. That's a surface water management plan, and from my perspective, that's the important point I'd look at in looking at that condition detail is that long-term commitment. And if these houses have to be for 1,000 years, then this arrangement has to work for 1,000 years. What we can't do, we can't predict the climate, and we have to work on the best information we have today. So I think I'll leave it there for the time being, and I don't know if Jason wants to add anything about that.
Yeah, I will come in. So with regard to the management and maintenance, the applicant has put forward management and maintenance plans as part of the discharge of condition application, and essentially it will be done in accordance with national guidance, which is what we look at. Ideally, if a lot of the legislation as part of the Flood and Water Management Act had actually been enacted, Suffolk County Council as the local lead of flood authority would have been actually a Suds adoption body, and these types of assets would have been taken on by ourselves. However, the government at the time decided not to enact that part of the Flood and Water Management Act. So we, I'm afraid, are left with different avenues for management and maintenance with regard to who does it. It could have been put up for adoption to Anglian Water, but because of the application was of an age before the utility companies took on surface water drainage with regard to Suds features, that's not an option. The other option would be that the district council took it on as part of public open space, providing the understanding that Mid Suffolk don't wish to take on additional public open space which utilises Suds features. So the third and final option, I'm afraid, is it sits with a private management firm, which would either be wholly owned by Bellway or could actually be arranged so that all the owners of the properties are sort of joint owners. That's the only options are available, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Tim Passmore, you want to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I'm really just backing up what I was saying, but surely it can't be beyond the wit of man. If it is a condition of the planning permission, and I know these are reserved matters, to have an effective management plan for the water, well, there has to be a mechanism to make sure it's enforced, because like you said, Matthew, the worry is go down 10, 15 years, these things do have a habit of just not being applied. So maybe there is a way to do it. And another suggestion, and I don't want to get too technical about this, but perhaps with the SIL payments, there is a way forward. Could I suggest to the committees, as I can't vote on this, that is part of the, if permission is given.
Well, can I suggest you add that, you comment on that when we get to your speech?
You can certainly suggest it. I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Philip Isborough, you wanted to come back in? No.
I'll come back later, Chairman.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant at this stage? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for answering the questions. Okay. Just look at my notes. I'll now go on to the ward members. We have 2 ward members who are able to speak here, Councillor Tim Passmore and Councillor John Whitehead. Over to you in whichever order you want to go.
I think John's going to do this first, and then I'll come in afterwards, if that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you, Matthew.
Councillor Whitehead, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I'd like to start by first thanking you for your decision on the 20th of January, where you asked the applicant to take some more time and reconsider various aspects of their application. I agreed with the conclusions you reached at that meeting. There is no doubt that Bellway have always sought to consult and liaise with the local residents on this application, and I commend them for doing so. Since the last committee meeting, the Parish Council and myself have also met virtually with Bellway and the representatives. We have had some useful discussions and interchange of views. There are some great improvements in their revised plans. Although I myself did not raise the issue of triple parking, the committee were correct to do so, and I'm pleased that this has been resolved for all bar one plot. One excellent revision relates to the change that Bellway made to plot 1, following both my representations and those of Mr. Bates on behalf of his elderly parents. Changes are almost certainly needed, and this new configuration, which includes transposing the house and the garage of plot 1, and also reducing elevation of that garage roof, is much appreciated. It is a great improvement. When the Parish Council and I recently had our virtual meeting with Bellway, a considerable portion of the meeting focused on the roundabout. It's quite clear that Bellway's hands are tied by the requirements set out by the Highways Authority when it comes to the layout of the entrance to the estate. It would defy logic for Bellway to submit a plan for this entrance that would result in the estate road not becoming adoptable as a public road. So the applicant, the Parish Council and myself as ward member would prefer a different configuration, but it seems we must defer to the highways experts and their firm belief that this mini roundabout is the correct solution. Bellway have worked within those constraints and have made improvements to the cycling configuration. There remains real concern about current access by all vehicles to that closed section of the old Norwich Road, which by law should be buses only. I do understand this issue predates Bellway's involvement in this area, and it also falls outside any red line boundary, but something does need to be done to improve the tank trap and its CCTV and to discourage illegal use of this closed road. Some mechanism needs to be found so that, as I said at the last committee meeting, money from this new development must go towards beefing up the barriers and on monitoring the illegal road use, maybe using ANPR technology rather than someone just watching a screen 24/7. It also remains clear in my mind that many new residents with children attending the schools in Claydon will be tempted to use this unauthorised route for much easier access to these facilities. I share local residents' views that more could be done regarding the local flooding and water runoff from the site. I can understand that the bunds created around the Suds Basin should help, but clearly the biggest issue seems to be that the old Norwich Road is a barrier that prevents the escape for the water from the wetlands part of the site to the dry culverts on the east side of the road. The electricity pylons and cables on the site clearly prevent any building in this area. And maybe I'm being over cynical, but I do wonder whether Bellway might have found a better drainage solution had they been able to use this part of the site for building. Whilst the work is being undertaken on the old Norwich Road with the creation of the new access to the site, it would certainly help existing affected local residents if improved drainage could be arranged under the road to remove this water build-up. Finally, can I reiterate Mr. Bates' request that a sympathetic management plan, which can be strictly enforced, is created to mitigate the effect on near neighbours of the lengthy construction period of this large site. I would request committee members give due consideration to the matters I've raised as you debate the revised submission before you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Passmore.
Thank you, Matthew. I won't repeat what Councillor Whitehead has already said, but just a couple of other points to add to this. Regarding the bus gate, I do think that's absolutely fundamental. We need to make sure that there is a proper system of enforcement there. John suggested ANPR, and just so members do realise, the police do have activity down there, and I think it was last week or the week before they did issue 4 penalty tickets. But technology would be a solution. Could I suggest that perhaps some of the SIL money that will be accrued from the development could be used to deal with that? Because I think that would be very, very helpful to do that. And also, as I hinted earlier in my question regarding a guarantee about flooding, I do think we need to do everything possible to try and find that. And again, I don't know whether this is permitted or not, but I would suggest there'll be a fairly sizable SIL payment. Maybe that would help address the concern of those residents who might be vulnerable to flooding, because we have to look ahead for the extremes that we do get. And I absolutely take the point, once in 100 years. Well, those of us will remember the great storm of 1987, which was once in every 250 years. And we had another serious scale, I think it was about 7 or 8 years afterwards. But I'm just making the point on that. And the only other comment I would make, I absolutely agree with what the general conversation of the committee members has been regarding heating systems. It is a pity that we are not looking at these other technologies, air force heat pumps and ground force heat pumps. Yes, there are some grants and supports available. I think an enlightened approach to this would be that at least some of them perhaps could be included. Having said all that, I too would like to thank Bellway Homes and for the engagement that they've done. They have moved very quickly, which is unusual, so a couple of brownie points for that, to address the concerns. And I think overall they have done a good job to do that. And it would be good if all developers had that same positive approach, in my view, to address the concerns. Thank you, Chairman, very much.
Very much. Do we have any questions for the ward members? No. Okay. Yes,
Yes.
we've got one hand gone up.
Yes, Councillor Mansell.
Yeah,
my question is maybe not for the ward members to answer, but it's something that was raised by Councillor Passmore that I would like some clarification on. He mentioned the possibility of using sill payment to, I think his terms would beef up the bus gate or whatever it was called, and for drainage issues. And can I just have some clarification that sill payments, the district pot of sill payments, are actually allowed to be used for such things as that? Because do they come under the auspices of highways which aren't covered by sill?
Philip, Isabel, can you come in on that, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think Councillor Mansell has the distinct advantage of a question which I don't have an immediate answer to. I think my recollection is that highway matters are Section 106 related. Public transport related matters are part of the infrastructure of SIL. And my instinct is that, and having had a long conversation about bus stops as part of this conversation, and bus stops almost certainly are a SIL matter, we've established that. My instinct is if you're managing a route such that buses are the vehicles allowed to use it, that probably does sit within SIL. Can I take that question away for a little bit and think further on it? But at the moment, my instinct is that a SIL bid for that is within the realms of the possible. If you're looking to establish an AMPR system there, I don't think it's necessarily a Section 106 matter. It is also a matter that's not necessarily related to this development or driven by this development. So it probably wouldn't be something that I would naturally recommend to you as a Section 106 obligation. But if I can just reflect further on that, Chairman, that's my thoughts at the moment.
And the drainage? What about drainage? Are they still covered or not?
I will also need to think on that one because I can't immediately recall the terms of the SIL contribution. I suspect it may well be, but I will need to check that. So leave that with me, please, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the ward members? No. Okay, members. Well, we've had all the information put before us. Philip, are you happy we can? Sarah, Councillor Mansell, are you happy we continue into the debate? Then we just hear from Philip at some point.
Yes, I'm sure it will be mentioned in debate as well anyway. Yeah. But yes, yeah. If he can beaver away in the background, that's fine.
That's fine. Okay, great. So we'll go into debate now. So members, it's over to you to discuss. We've had all the information put before us and to reach a conclusion. Councillor Muller, you were first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened with great interest about the discussion on the heat pumps, etc. But I would draw members' attention to one of the conclusions on page 153 regarding the air source heat pump system. Apparently, air source heat pumps are technically feasible for the buildings in this scheme. However, the potential increase in carbon dioxide emissions associated with their use in comparison to a gas baseline under current regulations means they are not considered a preferred low carbon technology at this stage. I thought that's quite an interesting point. And with regards to the ground source heat pumps, the conclusion on that is that ground source heat pumps, or I'll keep losing it on my page. Hang on, I'm just trying to get it back again. Here we go. Well, not quite. So I'm just trying to scroll it up. Yeah. Apologies. I'll have to go on the papers. Hang on. It's with regards to the ground source heat pumps. The argument is, and I quote, Ground source heat pumps are considered technically feasible for buildings in this scheme. However, the cost and difficulty associated with vertical boreholes at this site means that they are not considered a viable or preferred low carbon technology at this stage. I think that's really quite an important point, Chair, and that was the only point I was going to make on that. But I do also agree with the comments made about the Suds, and whether some, if the culverts are blocked underneath the old Norwich Road, then perhaps that does need to look into quite urgently. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson's asked if we can have a comfort break, and we do normally have a comfort break after 90 minutes, and my apologies, we have gone just over 90 minutes.
100 minutes.
Yeah, I know, my apologies, I hadn't kept my eye on that. So I'm very happy to have a quick 10-minute break. Can we please just make sure we have no discussion about the application, and we'll start again at 11:20. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. We'll just do a quick roll call just to check we're all present and we can continue the debate. Rob, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if members could just inform me that they are present. So Councillor Richard Mayer.
Present.
Councillor Dave Muller.
Present.
Councillor Rachel Eburn.
Present.
Councillor John Field.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Mansell.
Present.
And Councillor John Matheson.
Present.
We're all here, Chair.
Lovely. Thanks very much. Okay, so we've started the debate and we now move on to Councillor Field. I'm sorry, before we do that, Philip Isbell's just been through the points that were raised and we can just come and hear those before we continue. Philip, over to you first.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Mansell asked two questions. One was about the potential to use SIL in relation to the busgate infrastructure question and in relation to the drainage matter. Certainly in relation to the busgate, I mean, I'm fairly comfortable that there's potential to use that in relation to policing of the busgate. It seems to me to fit within potentially both improvements in public transport and transport infrastructure points, which are captured under CS6 of your core strategy. I'm less comfortable around the surface water point, Chairman, because I don't see quite how that fits at this point in time with anything that's listed as an item of infrastructure. Utility provision is included, but at the moment I'm not convinced that that's what this is. So if I can leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Councillor Field.
Thank you. I think broadly I'm in favour of this development. It is necessary to build houses to meet various commitments, particularly those to young people within the area. And as the report points out, this development is in the Ipswich Fringe. I think it's mid-Suffolk Ipswich Fringe, not Baber as the report states, but nevertheless it's Ipswich Fringe, and therefore there is a presumption that it's a place where there is good access by public transport, good access in a variety of ways. It's even within walking distance of much of the town, and it's employment, and there are good employment opportunities. So my feeling is that is reasonable, but there are a set of issues that we must make sure highways resolve, particularly highways, perhaps others as well. The cycling thing, improvements to the roundabout are welcome. It would be good if that was a completed set of conditions so that people could totally see what the issues are in that area and that safety problems have been addressed. It's a long time since I rode 10 miles to work every day, but one's quite aware that cycling is more hazardous than driving your car, and we need to do what we can to minimise the hazard. On the issue of the bus gates, it's probably incorrect for me to state that as the county councillor, I offered Highways the money to put in an APNR camera when Sandra Gage was the highways engineer for the area. So it's not been done for a long time. We really need something to do something to ensure that the facility is used legally. There's a simple method of enforcing that. Clearly the sort of cameras that one uses to police entry to waste sites are not expensive, could be applied, and if they can be required to be funded through SIL, that would be marvellous. On the issue of drainage, I think it's a similar issue, that there is clearly a long-term problem there. Long-term probably means a 50-year problem with an increased number of houses it needs addressing. And clearly the roundabout construction is going to disturb the surface of the old Norwich Road pretty substantially. So there would seem to be an opportunity to make improvements. It may just be that culverts under the road, drains under the road are blocked. That was done, that occurred on more than one road in this particular area. So it's quite possible that it's a simple problem to resolve. If not, I think highways need to attack that issue. I'll continue slightly on that front. Solar panels, one understands that they're a cost to each development, and that now there is no feed-in tariff. The yield from them. The monetary yield is not dramatic, although there is obviously a yield in useful electricity into the grid. It is a concern and a regret that we can't persuade builders to put such things on the roofs of new houses. Part of the cost of that is we're about to lose some 240 acres of prime farmland in the area to provide the panels in a different location, but one recognises the arguments. So I think that's my line of our reasoning. I say I'm broadly in favour. I will listen obviously to the rest of the debate and see if there's anything that persuades me otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Leadburn, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that the consultation that's taken place between Bellway and residents, and that they have made changes to this application. But I also understand residents' concerns, the immediate residents, especially in relation to flooding. I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to protect the interests of current and future residents in the decisions that we make. One of those areas is with regards to sustainability. There is a sustainability and energy strategy noted in the conditions, but it's disappointing that a developer is looking just to meet the minimum and not actually look to really protect the residents' future needs. And it would be a shame, well, more than a shame, if future residents were then to put, PV on the roofs of their homes, or take out gas boilers and put in whatever source of heat is needed. And I think it is just unfortunate that while Fabric First is a principle that leads to well-insulated homes, I do think in this day and age we are well beyond just saying let's just insulate the homes. We really need to push further, and I'm disappointed that the developer hasn't got a more forward-thinking view on that, particularly thinking for the future of all the residents on this site. The other issue, particularly, and just on that sustainability strategy, I don't know if in the conditions we can actually ask for something extra, or how that can be beefed up in any way. The other big issue to me seems to be about flooding, and including flooding off-site. And again, what is the long-term plan? Can something be done about this sort of barrier, as it were, that is the Norwich Road, with culverts, or however can that be part of the conditions again with regards to the drainage and suds features? And I do think we really need to give confidence to local residents that this development isn't going to impact on them in that way, and that in a few years' time we'll be getting complaints to council saying our houses are flooding because of this development. Yeah. So we really need to do what we can. Today.
Can I just ask Philip, can we do any sort of informative note around the issue of the flooding under the road and the points that are being raised? Is there anything that we can do to flag up our concerns so that they are looked at?
It's not uncommon, Chairman, for the committee to, where you have matters like this, traffic regulation orders sometimes, for instance, to send a parallel instruction to officers to follow that question up. And as I said, you've got a series of conditions here on the outline planning permission which do require the surface water management issue to be looked at, and that's already under consideration, so I'm not going to speak further about that. But yeah, it's perfectly possible for committee to send a parallel instruction, never mind deciding the reserve matters.
So I'm just throwing it out there. Could we put a informative note along the lines of making sure that the existing residents are absolutely, that further work is done to ensure the safety of the existing premises, and the issue of the flooding along the Old Norwich Road, to make sure that we want to see some action there, not just left to continue. I mean, how can we phrase that? Because you're hearing the message. I mean, everyone's saying the same thing. They're two big issues. I mean, the sustainability issue is a different issue, and we've covered why we can't enforce ground source or air source heat pumps. But on those 2 points, what can we do?
So, Chairman, you can add an informative that you would expect the Planning Authority and the Flood Authority to have undertaken reasonable investigation of the local residents' concerns regarding surface water drainage issues and any culverts or drains under the road as part of their review of the surface water drainage planning conditions that are attached to the outline. So you can send that as, I mean, it's effectively an instruction to officers. If you can leave the thinking around some wording on that, Chairman, just so that we can formalise it in a way that is understandable to all, that might be best.
I'm just throwing it out there. It may not be the wish of the committee, but just so that we know what we can and can't do.
If I give it some thought, Chairman, and that's certainly something that the committee can do.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn, did you want to add anything else?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to reiterate, if I may, that those two particular issues, and I think we, as I said, we do need to protect the interests of both current and future residents, and I would like to have seen more movement from Bellway on the sustainability issues, as we have seen from other developers, and I do hope that we can put something in the conditions if members are minded to approve, but I'll wait to hear what my other colleagues say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell and Councillor Mayer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to cover stuff that's already been mentioned by my fellow councillors, but here we are trying to determine a reserve matters application to follow on from the outline permission, which was granted by appeal. So we're not disputing that there are going to be some houses on this land. We need to make sure that the houses that are built on this particular plot of land are suitable and the optimum layout, optimum design, all the rest of it for this particular location. And as yet, I am to be convinced that we do have the optimum solution to put in houses on this particular plot of land. Whilst I agree that it's really pleasing that Bellway has worked with the parish council and the planning officers and the highways department to address some of the issues that we raised last month. I won't go on about the gas-fired boilers because others have already mentioned that, but I would just like to query something that Philip Isbell did mention, saying that we weren't in a position to insist on this because it was part of the outline. Now, to my mind, however you're going to heat your house, to me, is an integral part of the design of the house, and I thought design was a reserve matter, but maybe I'm wrong. However, my biggest bugbear about this whole hoo-ha is the roundabout, and I completely agree with the residents' comments that why on earth are Suffolk Highways proposing a roundabout here when the vast majority of traffic coming along Old Norwich Road will be going to this new development. Straight on is a dead end for cars, it's a bus lane and it's a cycle lane. It's part of the National Cycle Network. And we all know and we all agree, and thank you very much for Suffolk County Highways officers to be present today to answer my queries on this. But we still don't seem to have the final answer for the layout of the roundabout to make sure that it's suitable for cyclists. Now, we all know, and I'm glad it's really appreciated, that for a cyclist who wants to effectively turn right at a roundabout, they should hog the right-hand lane. If you are a novice cyclist, a young child cycling to school, you are probably not going to have the assertiveness or the confidence to hog the road when there's a bus snorting up behind you and a load of traffic slewing round to the left of a roundabout. And it is going to deter people from using what is essentially meant to be part of our national cycle network. There will be children going from Whitton to school in Claydon. And I do not think that a roundabout is the best option for this particular location. Had this road not been part of a national cycle network, I probably wouldn't be arguing so much about it. So I just don't think that the access arrangements quite fit the bill for this particular location. So I'm at the moment that is my sticking point, and for that reason, at the moment, I'm not prepared to support this application. However, I'm not sure that my views are shared by the rest of this committee. In follow-up to my question about the use of sill payments to enhance the security, or whatever you want to call it, of the bus gate, thanks very much for the confirmation that this is something that sill money can be used for. Again, because this isn't demanded as a from this development, is that something that we have to put in as informative, that it needs to be looked into, and who would actually be applying for the sill money to do this work? Who is responsible for maintaining the integrity of a bus only lane? Because my understanding of sill is somebody has to apply for the money and then carry out the work. Presumably it's not us as a district council's responsibility. Is it the county council, or whose responsibility is it to make that bid for sill money and get that work done?
Okay, let's ask Philip Isbell. He can probably answer that question for you.
Thank you, Chairman. As a piece of infrastructure associated with the highway, I would expect the County Highway Authority to lead on that. I understand from my colleague Christine Thurlow that this work would need to be identified in the district's infrastructure funding statement, but I think that it will be for the county to lead on the provision of that as an item of infrastructure and set the specifications for it. So that's where that would start, Chairman. You don't particularly need to do anything in this committee, and one can send a message as a further point of an informative around this as a request that be explored. But ultimately, it rests with others to make the formal request for sill funding, as I understand it.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Not wishing to repeat what other councillors said, but I think Bellway should be applauded for the effort they've made to address the issues that we highlighted, and indeed to engage with the local residents. So that's excellent. The roundabout, yeah, I think that's down to highways. They're the authority. They've got to make the decision. Though I think Councillor Mansell makes very good points. Heating, hugely disappointing, but actually outside our remit. But I thought it was telling when the Bellway's representative said they didn't want to redesign the internal spec of the houses. So they're quite happy to pass that cost on to the residents, which is hugely disappointing, because we know that things like heat source pumps will be used in the future. My big issue is around the Suds and Drainage. Mr. Isabel made the point that we should consider, is the Suds solution reasonable? Well, I don't think we can say it's reasonable. We have a known drainage problem on this site that hasn't been addressed, and we've superimposed a Suds system on top of that. How can we be sure that they won't interact? What is going to be the net effect? So I don't think it is reasonable to ignore a known drainage issue and just superimpose the Suds system on top. And part of me just wishes people could be more creative. Here we have an area that is almost a wetlands in itself. Can we not combine the two, thereby removing the threat to the houses and creating a more a wildlife area that would add huge benefit? So I don't think enough work's been done around the Suds and drainage in its entirety. It needs to be looked at as one package, and on that basis, unless we can put in some very strong conditions, I'm not sure I can support this application as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Yes, again, shan't repeat lots of things. I must say I'm agreeing with Councillor Mansell regarding the junction. I mean, there's a very odd statement at 14.7 suggesting that changing the junction to a priority junction would create a cul-de-sac north of Whitton. But obviously there's already a cul-de-sac north of Whitton created by the bus gate. So it's a very, very strange statement there. And but I think, you know, stepping back a little bit, the inspector said yes, the principle is agreed. So our job is to get the best that we can through conditions and so on out of this, and as several members have now said, there are some things that are just very worrying. What I would particularly want to dwell on is that and this is perhaps something for Councillor Field and indeed Councillor Hicks, that after quite a lot of pushing in my ward, we identified that a drainage problem of flooding the road, etc., was indeed due to a blocked culvert.
I'm really sorry, Councillor
Matheson.
Councillor Matheson, we're not interested in your ward. I'm really sorry. We're talking about the planning application before us. You could keep to the point, please.
The point I'm heading to absolutely for is there seems every likelihood there's a culvert underneath this road that is blocked, and unfortunately there's a very long list of jobs like that waiting to be done, and my urgent one that I refer to is only about number 70 something in a very long list. But on the other hand, you know, can we make it a condition somehow that that is found? And if it isn't found, whether we can actually put in a culvert. I'm sure there's one there. Actually,
we have been told we could make it. We have been told it can be part of an informative note. We've discussed that already. Myself and Councillor.
Not stronger than that. Not stronger than that. Is there not some way we can actually make this that it needs to be solved before we actually go ahead and build? That's what I'm really looking for here. I think that's the dominant concern, and obviously I think that
can you come in, please?
The future says we want some different energy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I could just come in on the surface water drainage, and I fully recognise the strength of feeling, and I recognise that Councillor Mayer says he doesn't think this is reasonable. I have no professional evidence that tells me it is unreasonable. And this is a balance of probability judgment. And at the moment, I am hearing things about a drainage situation. At the moment, I have advice from the Flood Authority and advice from the applicant's technical advisors. And if I'm really honest, this is a consideration of a reserve matters application. The reserve matters that we have before us today are not drainage. Just so we're quite clear, reserve matters in this instance include access, appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale. I believe fits within those reserve matters to the extent that they may or may not be matters of layout and landscaping. There are separate conditions, and if members bear with me, these conditions are in the appeal decision in your papers, and conditions 8, 9, 18 and 19 all manage surface water drainage. Now, if members have a quick look at those, they will see that they do require the council to agree these arrangements. And I think, Chairman, to try and impose a condition or to refuse an application at this stage on that issue, I think would be unreasonable. So I'm going to take a position on that. I think what you'd suggested, Chairman, as regards an informative is a pragmatic solution. We don't know about the existence of a culvert under the drain. I believe Sam Harvey didn't indicate we knew there was such an asset. We do need to ensure that this development does not make any surface water flooding situation any worse, but no development is expected to solve problems that existed before it came along. It is only expected, to use a euphemism, to wash its own face. So we have conditions and we have condition submissions which we are looking at with the flood authority, and it is perfectly reasonable for the committee to give us an instruction around that.
Can you just remind us the pages they're on? I think they're on page 120.
The version I'm looking at, unfortunately, I think it's page 78 of 117 is what I think I've got. I'm not entirely convinced because I'm looking at
page 115.
So
the appeal decision starts on page 115 of our papers, members, just so you're aware.
Right. Okay. And at the end of that, there is a list of conditions, and amongst those, you have a condition relating to discharge of surface water into the highway. That's condition 8. Condition 9 is details of construction surface water management plan. So that's to manage surface
that's
water.
on page 129 of our pack.
Apologies, I'm not going to. And then conditions 18 and 19 relate to a surface water drainage scheme, and condition 19 follows along with an implementation, maintenance and management plan, and both of those are conditions to be resolved. But this is an application for reserve matters. We are discussing matters which I think are within the territory of those conditions, and it's perfectly reasonable to send a message to officers to instruct them to ensure this issue is looked at, but I'm not convinced that that is the territory of this debate. I'll leave it there, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mayor, did you want to come back? Is that an old hand or a new hand? Old hand. And Councillor Matheson, old hand. Okay, well, there's no other speakers, so I think thank you to Philip Isbell for just bringing us back to what we need to consider today. And we have heard that this, obviously we do know this is a reserve matters application, and the things to look at are the access, appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, and we have the appeal decision in our pack. I do want to thank Bellway. I mean, one of my pet hates has been triple parking, and they've eliminated it. And I think that, you know, that shows the power of the committee to ask an applicant to go away and to reconsider, and they have. In terms of the heating of the properties, I absolutely get the point that Councillor Mansell and Eburn and others have made, but that is not within, you know, that's not within our gift. So you know, while it may be disappointing, I accept that. I don't think that's a reason that I can turn around and refuse this application. So from my perspective, of course, the thing I am most worried about for me is the existing properties and the impact they may have from having things put in place close to them. So for me, I would like to see an informative note put in regards to the protection of those properties, and we'll ask Philip to cover the wording. We've already covered this off. And also to talk about that if there is a culvert, if it could be explored if there is one, that we make sure that that is included. And those would be the items I'd want in an informative note. So as no one else has spoken or proposed or seconded anything, I'm very happy to propose along those lines for approval, but I'm obviously up to others as to how they feel. Councillor Muller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what you say and what Mr. Isbell says about an informative note. Therefore, I am happy to second your proposal for the recommendation to approve this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Could I just ask, therefore, Philip, could you just run through what the informative note could say in terms of wording, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So what I would suggest, and I'll read this longhand because I think that sets out the expectation. So this will be an informative note. The committee, in approving these reserve matters, noted the significant concerns of adjacent residents regarding surface water flooding risks, and in particular the need to ensure that surface water drainage is not impeded by Old Norwich Road. The committee expects the applicant to work with officers of the local planning authority and the local flood authority to ensure that any surface water drainage arrangements for Suds do not have any adverse impact on the surface water flooding situation in the locality. Committee asks officers of the local planning authority to work with the local highway authority to establish whether any culvert under Old Norwich Road exists and requires management or maintenance in order to prevent surface water flooding risks.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman, still writing that as we go.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got a few more hands gone up. Councillor Matheson, Eburn and Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just looking at my notes on the conditions that are suggested and so on. There's a couple of things about that. I think an easy one is that the ecology, I think ecology or landscaping consultee asked that we specified biodegradable tree guards. I think that's the first, which my understanding is that we should be getting at Woodland Trust and so on are now asking for those. So if that was one little snippet that if we could include. And the other one was that perhaps slightly more contentious, and see what others think. The parish council asked for the removal of permitted development rights regarding garage change of use. This was to make sure that they didn't finish up with parking spilling out onto the Norwich Road from the development. So perhaps whether we wanted to do that as well. And I'll get the other question, really, I think, for Mr. Isbell was presumably the Section 106 agreement referred to at 11.2 has actually been signed.
Shall I come in now, Chairman?
Oh, sorry,
Please
Chair.
do.
Do you want me to answer some of those questions as well?
Well, Chairman, can I suggest, for voting purposes, Mr. Carmichael will need the words. So perhaps if I email Mr. Carmichael the words, Mr. Heffer can give you some advice on some of those points. And the Section 106 for Councillor Matheson's benefit was part of the outline, and the planning permission will not have been granted without it. So, and I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, just on the other 2 points Councillor has raised, I don't think there's any issue at all with the biodegradable tree guards. That's something we could specify within the wording of a condition. With regard to the permitted development, that would be an issue that should have been removed at outline stage if it was felt appropriate. I don't think we could remove it as part of reserved matters. The only thing I would say is that, as I said in the presentation, the amount of parking that's been provided is in accordance with the adopted standards. So we're content that the parking provision both for residents and visitors does meet your standard. But I would guard against removal of PD against, on a reserved matters proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think those are sensible additions. I just wanted to query whether it says on the conditions that following informative notes is necessary in support for sustainable development principles. And I was just wondering if there's any way of sort of boosting that in any way.
How?
I know that's my question. The trouble is we were in a committee where we had a fantastic one, and I can't go and quote back. If I can remember the application number.
We'll come back to that. When Philip's finished writing, we'll get him to see when he's finished writing that bit. We'll come back to him.
Thank you, Chair.
So, okay. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to remind people that we were also, there was some discussion of an informative about Suffolk County Council looking at the bus gate issue. And I'd also like to bring back the subject that when I asked the questions about the roundabout to the highways officer, I got the impression that the drawings that we've been given and that we're actually determining today may not be the final layout for the cycle lane. And I can't see anything in the conditions about some sort of whatever's going to happen to that plan. If it's not the plan that we're given, is that the one that we're approving?
No, I think it was made clear to us, actually, but we'll bring in Philip Isbell, that this is the standard process that goes through. It may be tweaked slightly at the end, but we'll get reconfirmation on that for you. Councillor Isbell.
I'm not a council chairman, but thank you. Promotion indeed.
Getting tongue-tied.
So no, and I'm still typing, so I'm not quite with all the questions that have floated out. But in terms of the cycling arrangements, this will be effectively managed under Section 278, and it would seem to me perfectly reasonable to add that to the informative. So if you're content, Chairman, I'll continue typing and put some suggestions that I can then talk to you on that.
So we've had a request from Councillor Mansell about the Section 278 and the cycling. We've had a question from Councillor Eburn around the bus gate sorry, someone else has talked about the bus gate,
Yeah,
and we've
the bus
also
gate.
talked about can we have anything in the informative about being more about the sustainability, pushing it a bit more, encouraging Bellway in any other way.
One can certainly do those things. All I need now is a little time to type, Chairman.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Councillor Matheson, we're
Yes,
not really looking to add any more, but
just
I'm
to
happy to
provide
listen.
some time for Mr. Isbell to do his important work, getting the words right. I do hope that Bellway Homes will take away from this meeting this committee, and indeed I think this council's dismay that it's not moving in the direction that it should be regarding means of heating houses. We are trying to build development for the next 50 years, not for the next sort of 3 years. And the direction of travel is clear.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Okay, so when Robert is ready, we will ask him to read out the recommendations along with the informative note. Councillor Field, do you wanted to come in?
Can't resist being slightly controversial. I was just going to point out that some of the concerns about the Bellway quote about sustainable heat are based in 2018. I think that's 3 years ago, and the world moves at a rapid rate. So leave you with that thought.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Okay, so over to Rob when you're ready.
Chairman, can I suggest, I'm still typing, so Rob hasn't got anything to give you. You might want to hold things for 5 minutes, because that will probably take me to finish this.
Okay, we'll give everyone, we'll start again at 12:05, just to give you time just to type that up and get it over to Rob. Okay, so we'll just run through what the informative note's going to say. So over to you, Philip, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'd suggest the following text. So the committee, in approving these reserved matters, noted the significant concerns of adjacent residents regarding surface water flooding risks, and in particular the need to ensure that surface water drainage is not impeded by Old Norwich Road. The committee expects the applicant to work with the local planning authority and the lead flood authority to ensure that any surface water drainage arrangements for SUDs do not have any adverse impact upon surface water flooding in the locality. The committee requests officers of the local planning authority to work with the local highway authority to A, establish whether any culvert under Old Norwich Road exists and requires management or maintenance in order to prevent the backing up of surface water and related surface water flooding risks. B, establish whether cycle crossing and shared cycle/footway provision can be made at the roundabout and Estate Road junction. And C, the provision of ANPR infrastructure for the bus gate. The committee, moreover, notes the approach to the sustainability design taken by the applicant and strongly encourages the applicant to take account of the Council's direction of travel for this, set out in draft policy LP25 of the draft joint local plan, and its expectations that all applicants will recognise the importance of improving sustainability measures in new house design in future applications. Thank you, Chairman. Leave it there.
Thank you very much. Robert, over to you. John Field, Councillor Field, sorry, did you want to come in?
Sorry, just with Phil's words, they talk a lot about culvert that exists and what you do. We make no requirement to ensure that if one is required, you know, that they take action other than just establishing whether when the road was originally built there was a culvert there. So I wonder if we could strengthen that slightly without.
Well, could we say the existing culvert?
Or if such,
or explore the need for one in the future.
Yeah, explore for the need for one.
Well, I'll leave that to Mr. Carmichael to follow up. I mean, strictly speaking, it's not a reserved matters issue, I think.
Okay.
So it's probably in the hands of others.
I understand that, but it impacts strongly residents' acceptance of development across a wide area of the county. So I think it's important we address this sort of issue.
So, Robert, I'm going to go over to you. Can you just run through what we're being asked to decide today? And then if we need to tweak it slightly, we will.
The microphone on. So, thank you, Chair. So, what I have proposed, because there is a slight issue in mon.gov with the vote in that I can't put the whole text in, so apologies to Mr. Isbell, but it will be added to the recorded vote text. So I will add that to after the meeting, so that will be publicly available. So what I would propose that we do, and I've put in the vote as members can see, is that we recommend that application DC 20-03704 be approved as detailed in the officer recommendation, with the additional informative note as read out by the Chief Planning Officer, if that's acceptable to yourself, Chair, and your seconder. I think you're on mute, Chair. I apologise.
Thank you. Can I just ask for two things? So, on the biodiversity enhancement layout, which is recommendation 7, can we just add, and we would ask for the use of biodegradable tree guards?
Yep, I can put that in.
Okay. Now, the point that Councillor Field makes around the, Philip Isbell's view is that that's not something that's really for this committee to add, but it is a concern. So, can we just ask that? Well, I suppose the floods team are going to look at that and put in appropriate measures. So, is there anything more we can do, Philip, to just raise the profile of that? Because it'd be awful if there is no culvert and then nothing happens. And it needs
Forgive me,
to.
Chairman. Yes, yeah, you can certainly use it. Yes, sorry. What I was saying is you can't really expect it. You can't require it as a planning authority, but we can certainly use this. So let me just get the text up. And this relates to the exist. So I'd suggested to you A, to establish whether any culvert under Norwich Road exists and requires management or maintenance in order to prevent backing up, in order to prevent backing up of surface water and related and you'd probably add the text in there, and I'll send this again to Robert so that Robert has this, or whether a culvert should be, or whether such a culvert should be provided, might be the additional language. So if I add that and send that back to Robert, then he'll have that for the record.
Okay. Great. Well, I think on that basis, we've had everything put before us. We've covered a lot of ground. We've added informative note on various key subjects that concern us. So I'm happy that we now go to the vote that's been proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Muller. So, Robert, over to you for the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. So with those changes, and I've added in on the recommendation on modern.gov the biodegradable tree guards. So if members could please go to the modern.gov app by pressing the plus sign in the top right hand corner and then clicking on the vote, which is now in progress for this item, which will be in a light blue colour. The vote has started, so I will wait for votes to come in. Thank you, Chair. The vote has now been concluded and it is 6 votes for with 1 vote against.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move swiftly on to the next application, which is DC 20-05046 land to the northwest side of Barking Road, Needham Market. And I'll now hand over to the case officer Jasmine Wyard to introduce the application to committee. Over to you. And welcome.
Thanks,
I'm not sure if this is your first committee. Well, it's the first time you've been to this committee, so welcome to our committee and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, members. I'll just share my screen, so bear with me. Right, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
And can you see my cursor as well, just to double check?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'll be presenting case DC 20-05046 today, which is for the site land to the northwest side of Barking Road in Needham Market. This is an outline application for the erection of 279 dwellings with access to be considered and all other matters reserved. Members are reminded that this presentation should be viewed and understood in conjunction with the committee report, and it does not replace the detail and content within that report. So here is the site in context. The site is outlined in red. You've got Barking Road located along the southern boundary of the site. You've then got Needham Market to the east and the A14 and the A140 a little bit further east as well. And then Barking to the west there. The site is currently comprised of Grade 2 agricultural land, and the surrounding land is significantly rural and agricultural, as you can see. In terms of the parish location, the site predominantly falls within Needham Market, but a small area along the western side falls within Barking. In terms of the specific location of the site, it would be located adjacent to an existing residential estate. Along the eastern edge of the site are the estate roads of Foxglove Avenue, which is sort of this area along here, and then that splits off to Quinton Road, sort of to the north there. You've then got Needham Market Football Ground and Club, which is just sort of up here, just out of sight, and the GP surgery, which is just to the southeast here. And again, access along Barking Road to the south. So in terms of the constraints, the green area shows the extent of the Gipping Valley Special Landscape Area. You've then got the nearby heritage assets. So you have got predominantly the listed buildings within the conservation area along the High Street. You have got a couple of others as well, with the nearest being the Grade 2 listed Kennels Farm. The site falls wholly outside of but abuts the built-up area boundary of Needham Market, shown by the brown line, which sort of goes all the way along that side. The site also falls within a mineral safeguarding area, and there is a wooded area just along the western edge with protected trees in. The Barking Woods Triple SI is located to the southwest, sort of around here, but is just outside of this image. So giving a close-up of the special landscape area, obviously this is the special landscape area shown in green. And again, you sort of zoomed in, this is where the protected trees are, which are all protected by TPOs. So in terms of the existing connectivity, you've got public rights of way shown in green. So there are two bridleways running along the north. So the first one is bridleway 15, which is also known as the Drift. This then connects onto bridleway 17 over here. And then you've got a footpath which leads sort of further south in towards agricultural fields within the parish of Barking. You've then got a footway that leads along here, which leads again, they all sort of go to the high street. And then the station and bus stop. The bus stop runs from the Swan public house, and then you've got the railway station just sort of off of the high street over there. There are no cycling connections other than along the existing bridleway sort of to the north here. This is all solely pedestrian Right, so in terms of flood risk, the southern half of the site falls within flood zones 2 and 3, which shows fluvial risk as shown by the Environment Agency's mapping, which is these two images here. The light blue shows flood zone 2, the dark blue shows flood zone 3. And using the Environment Agency's modelling, the council then produces a strategic flood risk assessment, which splits flood zone 3 into 3A, which is greater than 1 in 100 annual probability of fluvial flooding, and 3B, which is the functional floodplain, which is where water has to flow or be stored in times of flooding. It's estimated within this strategic flood risk assessment that the site falls within 3B. The southern area of the site is also at risk from fluvial flooding. The southern area of the site is at risk from fluvial flooding, but also is at a high risk from surface water flooding, albeit to a slightly lesser extent, as shown by the hatched area on the other diagram here. So the key issues I'll be discussing include the principle of development, highways impacts and connectivity with Needham Market, the landscape and ecological impacts, flooding impacts, and specific aspects where insufficient information has been provided. So in terms of the settlement hierarchy, policy CS1 of the core strategy defines a settlement hierarchy which identifies that the site falls within the countryside in an area between the town of Needham Market and the countryside village of Barking. Based on the site's countryside location, policies CS2 and policy H7 are thus engaged in assessing housing development in the countryside. Whilst these may not be afforded full weight, they are still relevant and integral considerations to the acceptability of the principle. These policies are not, however, considered in isolation and combined with the wider basket of policies as listed within the committee report. As a whole, this basket of policies are considered consistent with the aims of the NPPF, and therefore the tilted balance is not engaged. The emerging joint local plan allocates 3 sites within Needham Market, which are listed here and also shown on this map as well. The site is not one of those allocated, as shown by the outline in red. And whilst this emerging plan currently holds limited weight, it nonetheless illustrates a direction of travel for planned growth. Furthermore, the submitted transport assessment with this application does not take this planned growth into account. Therefore, should these sites be developed in the future, previously unplanned highways mitigation may also be required for the delivery of these sites. Needham Market currently have an emerging neighbourhood plan, which, given its early stages, currently has no determinative weight. However, it was noted that the neighbourhood plan makes no additional allocations for housing to those shown in the emerging joint local plan. Furthermore, the application site is only referenced within this neighbourhood plan in a cohesive and strategic manner in relation to the creation of a relief road, which is shown by this black line here, which would divert traffic from the High Street to Barking Road. Whilst this holds no determinative weight, it is noted that the site would represent unplanned growth and a piecemeal approach to development, which is contrary to the approach adopted within the neighbourhood plan. Here we have a wholly indicative master plan, which shows how 279 dwellings could be accommodated on the site. It shows the extent of the flood zone to the southern area just here, which includes the access, which is a matter for consideration. It is noted several of these dwellings, which are considered more vulnerable forms of development under the Environment Agency's guidance, do partially fall within the flood zones, primarily sort of along here in terms of their curtilage. It is considered that these could be sequentially sited outside of the flood zones 2 and 3 into flood zone 1 in a reserve matters application. Again, the site character plan is wholly indicative, but provides an area on an idea on how the development could materialise. So 279 dwellings are proposed in total, and 100 of those would be affordables, which is in accordance with policy, and these would be secured via a Section 106 agreement. The affordable housing provision is, of course, a public benefit, significantly adding to the district's affordable housing stock. This is the overall concept plan, which is again indicative. There are, however, some discrepancies that I'd like to point out between this plan and the others in the previous slides. This plan shows a main access point to the north, which is misleading and has been confirmed as solely being an emergency access. So there is only one main access point, which is to the south here, which goes through the flood zone. Furthermore, a single access point serving 279 dwellings is inadequate, with one access being considered suitable to serve around 150 dwellings from a highways perspective in regard to their guidance. The sole access into the site is shown by the star just here. A snippet of the indicative master plan shows the extent of the flood zone into the site. Whilst this solely shows fluvial flood risk, this overlaps and covers the area also at risk from pluvial flooding, as shown on the earlier slide. 59 metres of the spine road inwards and the single main access would be within an area at most risk and most vulnerable to flooding. The submitted flood risk assessment with the application is out of date and dates from November 2018, and therefore does not use the most up-to-date modelling, which was produced in January 2020. Furthermore, the flood risk assessment does not take climate change into account. As a result, there are holding objections from the local lead flood authority and the Environment Agency, as insufficient and inadequate information has been provided from the perspective of pluvial and fluvial flooding. As the access runs through the functional floodplain, it is a wholly realistic prospect that occupants, any future occupants, will at times have difficulty accessing the site and could become trapped. The creation of an access in the most vulnerable flood zone is unacceptable and contrary to the aims of the NPPF, which seeks to steer development away from areas most vulnerable to flooding. So the video I'm about to show you starts facing westwards along Barking Road towards Barking and sort of turns clockwise around to show you the site, and then ends facing eastwards into Needham Market. The proposed access would be located sort of in the centre of the southern boundary of the site and would be located just beyond the 30 mph speed limit sign here. So an emergency access, as I noted earlier, is proposed to the north. However, no details have been provided on how it will be used or managed, the surfacing, its width, how it connects to the highway, its effect on the bridleway use, and the extent and type of the owner's access rights over private land. There is a surface section shown in photos 2 and 3, which is an access to the football ground. This is, however, private land and certainly could not accommodate traffic from 279 dwellings. Photo 4 shows the bridleway just beyond the turning into the football ground. An emergency access in this area would have to cross a bridleway and private land to meet the highway, which is along Quinton Road, as shown by photo 1 here. The creation of an emergency access in this location would be wholly unsuitable, and it would divert traffic from 279 dwellings through a residential estate. Alternatively, if it was only going to be used by emergency vehicles, then the occupants of 279 dwellings would have no means of vehicular access in or out of the site in the event of flooding. The bridleway in any event would have to be upgraded to a byway under a separate consent in order to be used by vehicular traffic, and would have to be secured prior to determination to ensure an emergency access could be created here. It has been confirmed that such consent is unlikely to be granted. The creation of an emergency access in this location is therefore considered to be completely inappropriate. This is the same slide as earlier, showing the connectivity within the area. The purple line is the only addition, which shows the extent and location of the proposed connection from the site to connect to existing infrastructure. So a 3-metre shared cycleway and footway is proposed for a short section before this goes down to a 1.8-metre wide footway to connect to the existing footway further eastwards, adjacent to the GP surgery. The star shows where the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit would be relocated to, so it would include and cover the whole access. This would be secured via a traffic regulation order, which is a separate consent from highways. So in terms of the existing infrastructure, it caters primarily for pedestrians, and the footway along sort of the northern part of Barking Road, just to the side here, measures between 1.8 metres and 1.2 metres in width. There are therefore questions on the quality of the footpaths and how they would cope with increased footfall, and whether they sufficiently would encourage the uptake of active travel, given the quality of connections proposed with the existing ones. This is specifically relevant to cyclists who, save for a short proposed section of the shared cycleway, would have to cycle on the road unless travelling along the bridleway to the north of the site. In terms of the levels of the site, there is a 17-metre difference in levels between the north and south of the site here. So the landscape, it's very open countryside, very rural character. The site acts as a buffer between the urban edge of Needham Market, which is just over here, and the SLA, which sort of starts by that wooded section over there. The council's landscape guidance identifies the site as being visually sensitive, acting as a rural backdrop to Needham Market, and as such, its development would represent an encroachment into the countryside. In contrast to the character of the area to the west, where agricultural fields are broken up by heavily wooded areas, this area is completely open and exposed, and thus is very visually prominent, especially given its elevated topography. So again, I have another video which shows the elevated views from the north of the site. The development would encroach into a visually sensitive gap, whilst adopting a discordant and poorly integrated form with the existing development adjacent. There are several aspects of the application where insufficient information has been provided, and as such it is reasonable for the council to adopt a precautionary approach in respect of these matters. The areas which lacked, some of the areas which lacked information I have previously touched on, which include details of the emergency access and the flood risk impacts and mitigation, and other areas which include the impact on future occupants from the noise and light from the football ground, the mineral potential on site as it falls within the mineral safeguarding area, impacts on air quality from the increased traffic, and ecological impacts and their mitigation. Subsequently, the recommendation is therefore one of refusal, the reasons for which are in line with those set out in the committee report.
Thank you very much. And that was a very thorough presentation, so thank you. Councillor Matson, you have a question.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a strange echoing noise at the moment, Chair. I'm not sure whether it's yours or someone else's.
Yeah, we'll just go to mute when we're not speaking. That should cover it. Over to you, John.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Norris or Mr. Isbell may be able to help with this one, but there was a slide put up which isn't in the papers of the current condition of the early stages neighbourhood plan, but it wasn't one that I recognised as being the most recent one that's been consulted on in the town. So I was a bit concerned that should creep into the papers through the presentation in the event of there possibly being an appeal on this one. And also, just to clarify, was the land in the special landscape area or adjacent to the special landscape area? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to answer those points, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Matheson. So in terms of the neighbourhood plan, this particular section I don't think is included in the main body of the report. It's sort of an appendix. This is all available online, and yeah, that's sort of where I've pulled it from, is from our main webpage on that. In terms of the special landscape area, the site does partially fall within the special landscape area. It coincides with where the woodland area is, with the trees that are protected within it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. Things seem pretty clear, but I note that on the sort of opening page, it talks about details of previous committee resolutions, and it says none. I thought this site had been to the committee before, and that we determined it with some constraints. I just wonder, am I wrong on that or not? The second sort of a point of is it detail? The access that you talk about is clearly across a flood area. Is that a raised access? Is it level with the existing Barking Road, or is it depressed so that it floods, or is it raised so that it doesn't flood? I mean, they're sort of details, and clearly the Flood Authority will have looked at those, but just for our interest. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So I'll take the first sort of question that you raised. In terms of the previous committee resolutions, it's not been specifically on this application or any sort of application really similar to this one. In terms of the previous application, it is noted under the planning history within the committee report, but it is an application dating from 2016, which is obviously 5 years ago. So policy and all the context has changed since then. It was a completely different scheme. I think it was for around 150 or so dwellings, definitely not including the whole site. My understanding is that the access that was previously discussed within that application is the same as this one, and there hasn't been, to sort of answer your second point, there hasn't been any sort of engineering solution or anything that means that that access would be raised or avoid any of the floodwaters. I'm not sure if Sam Harvey might want to add a little bit in terms of the highways impacts, but that's sort of my understanding of it.
Sam, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's basically Jasmine's covered it all. What the previous application that came in is the same for access, is the same as this one.
Thank you. Just the point I was making in a way is that my memory is that the previous thing was rejected unless there was an additional access because of the access, the flooding issue. So a bit of a struggle to understand why we're wasting our time with this today, but I'm sure that's a part of debate.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Passmore and Councillor Lieber, and then we'll move
Chairman,
on.
Could I just chip in, just as I have happy memories of that particular committee meeting myself. My recollection is that at the time the application may well have been recommended for approval, and flooding was a considerable concern to members at the time, and the application was, I think, refused on the committee's decision rather than the officer recommendation. That said, obviously it was a smaller, a lesser application, and the considerations and policies at the time were different. So Jasmine has covered that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Passmore, Councillor Eburn.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew, and thanks for the presentation, Jasmine. I don't know whether you're able to answer this, and it's not a curveball question. Have you any idea, if it were to go ahead, what sort of SIL contribution might be made? That was one question. And the other question, if the committee were to refuse this, I know it says on page 225 to delegate to the Chief Planning Officer grounds for defending an appeal. Have we got sufficient evidence and a robustness in the papers there to make that defence? And I know you can't guarantee anything with an appeal, absolutely, but would you be very confident that the grounds that you've listed for refusal there would actually do the job, should there be an appeal, please?
I think that's why it's come to. I think that's why it's before us now. Just to Jasmine, do you want to come in?
Yes, certainly. So in terms of the SIL contributions, I'm not entirely sure on that point. That's sort of an infrastructure perspective. I don't know if Phil might have anything to add on that point. In terms of the appeal, obviously the reasons that we put before you today are reasons that we already feel are robust enough to defend an appeal on. But again, I'd probably defer maybe some further detail and question from Phil or Stephen.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I can just simply say, and I'd obviously expect my officers to say that their reasons for refusal are robust and defensible, Councillor Passmore, but I think we fully anticipate that this has come in and may well lead to that consequence. So we have given some close scrutiny to the recommendation before you. The reason for mentioning the appeal is that there is sometimes a lag between the decision at committee and the issue of a decision notice, and if that happens, we're into that mind to make a decision world. So we're just covering off that base as we go, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lieburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got a couple of very quick questions. What level of consultation has been carried out between the applicant and the planning department, as it were, to the extent that, why we've got so many unanswered questions at this stage? Secondly, my understanding is that for more than 150 homes, there should be 2 accesses. And I know the football ground very well, and that access point there, which it's extremely busy a lot of the time. And I just wondered whether the applicant, it's probably a question for the applicant, whether they've had any consultation with the football club about access at that northern point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. In terms of the level of consultation, no pre-application advice was sort of sought, which obviously, we acknowledge we can't expect them, or it's not an obligation at all. But the level of sort of, I suppose, consultation and discussion has been very limited, which is hence why there are several sort of aspects which have got insufficient information on currently. And in terms of the level of consultation for the emergency access, I'm not aware of any consultation that's happened, but as you said, that's probably something that the applicant can confirm.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. We don't have a representative of the parish of Needham or from Barking Parish Councils, as it overruns into 2, or an objector or a supporter. So we'll go straight to the agent who would like to speak, Mr. Jason Parker. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you could turn your camera on, please, and your microphone on. And over to you, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay. Yes, so I don't disagree with lots of what was said in the presentation, but I'd like to go through a few points, if I may. This is a major housing development which could provide up to 279 dwellings of which 100 would be affordable homes. There isn't much mention in the consideration of this application in relation to the previous application. Now, that was for 152 dwellings, and it was refused in August 2017. Now, that covered just over half of the site and the front portion of the site. The application was actually recommended for approval from officers, and the committee refused that application solely on the basis that there was no emergency access. So in the event of a flood, the main access would be flooded, and it was felt that the school and facilities would be too far away. Now, what we've tried to do with this application is there have been negotiations with the adjoining landowner, which has resulted in a larger application coming forward. And the aim of that has been to address the emergency access issue. Now, we looked at various options for that, and there are other options available as well. But the best solution at the time seems to be the access to the top, particularly as the landowner had a private right of way over it, which we've got details of. Now, taking that into account, we feel as though that dealt with the reason for refusal, and we've provided additional information in terms of connectivity with facilities and services, and that appears in the application information. Now, what we have requested from the planning department is an extension of time, and the government introduced a national extension of time process, which is in place to allow the determination period to be extended and negotiations or amendments to take place. We're really happy to do that. We've offered the extension of time. Some agents say they're not prepared to offer it. We are. But unfortunately, that right hasn't been given to us. And I feel that there are a number of unanswered questions or technical issues which could easily be resolved with further information. That may very well leave the debate there in terms of the principle of development, but that's a debate we would like to have with the committee and with the officers. But at the moment, there are a number of unanswered questions which we feel we could easily answer with additional information. So what I would like to request is that the committee defers the application. We're happy to agree the extension of time for a reasonable period of time and beyond. And then when those matters are dealt with, it could be brought back to committee and we can have that discussion and debate. This is a significant major development. I would hope that the committee would give us that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the agent? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Councillor Field.
Sorry to have slow reactions. I think the agent answered a number of those issues, but it's still really unclear that there was a committee some considerable number of years ago that rejected a similar application based on flooding issues and based on the lack of a second access. I still have some difficulty in seeing really why those issues have not been addressed, because bringing the thing back to committee seems arguably to just waste everybody's time and resources. So very really clear, why hasn't this been progressed if the applicant still intends to continue?
Would the agent like to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to comment on that. I did try and explain that I feel like we have addressed the issues, because if you go back in time, in August 2017, the application was recommended for approval. Now, certain circumstances like heritage or landscape or those things haven't changed. They're exactly the same. Now, the only reason for refusal was that there was no emergency access. So if there was a flood, people couldn't get out of that area. Now, we feel like we've provided that with the bridleway. We can provide additional information as well to show that private right of way, and I'm asking for that opportunity. Now, that was the only reason for refusal, other than it was felt that there may not be good access to school facilities. Now, we feel as though the council's policy directs major developments at towns like Needham Market, and we provide additional information in terms of the connectivity. Also, the very facts that our site now goes up to the Bridle Way, that enables the connectivity as well. So we feel as though we've addressed both issues with actually extending the sites and offering that Bridle Way.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions? Stephen Stroud, do you want to come in?
Yes, good morning, Chair and everybody. I'm going to ask that question. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
I haven't popped up at committee for some time, but I think mindful that this may well end up in an appeal scenario. I am here and have obviously been listening to the presentation and comments thus far. I just wanted to come in, just clarify on the point made about the historic application from 2016-17. Obviously, and quite apart from the fact that, as Jasmine mentioned, it was a different policy context, not least the council couldn't at that time demonstrate a 5-year land supply. So, of course, the tilted balance, so to speak, was engaged as a consideration and an important consideration. Looking at the actual reason for the refusal, because I've got the decision notice here in front of me, yes, it is correct that it focuses on flood risk and connectivity. But also, in fact, at the end of the reason for refusal, it also mentions that that the development would fail to, and I'm quoting, would fail to represent sustainable development which would not conserve or enhance the local character of the area. So I think it's implicit within, well, in fact, explicit within that reference that there are wider issues at play, which I think, picking up on Councillor Passmore's question in terms of robustness of appeal, I think there are some principal matters here that effectively are not going to be overcome, and certainly not with the scale or nature of development that's being applied for in this instance, apart from any more sort of technical matters which may be capable of resolution and which could fall away prior to or early within the appeal process itself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for adding that in. Okay, we don't have any other hands up, so I'll move on. Sorry, one's just gone up. I've got Councillor Eburn. You have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair, if I may. Just on what, following from what Stephen Strauss just said, in the conditions, with regards to the emergency access, is it appropriate to mention the extent of traffic, as it were, that goes across that area at the top of the Bridle Way, going into the football club? Because, you know, on a weeknight, you've got, 50 young people training there with their parents and cars toing and froing, plus others. So I just wasn't clear from the condition whether there was sufficient in that. I'm just checking recommendation 2.
Stephen, do you want to comment on that?
To deal with that. Thank you, Chair.
Or Jasmine. Stephen or Jasmine.
Yes, I'm. Forgive the lag there. No, I'm happy to cover that. Yes, in terms of that second reason for refusal, it is quite long, and I think it would include those various considerations, and I think as set out in the report, which gives that sort of more overarching basis for the reasons for refusal. You can understand from the Highway Authority that, frankly, the access proposed at that northern part of the site is unacceptable, and actually, and especially with the advent of the new framework, which has come in post the last application, a lot of this and a lot of the sort of the technical engineering, evidential based work and matters. It really is a matter of sort of tell me, show me, and so much emphasis should be placed on the onus of an applicant putting forward that detail and giving comfort to the decision taker that these things can be adequately dealt with, and that the flows of arising from the development in traffic terms can be assimilated. And frankly, this application is deficient in a number of ways. And as I say, there are principal issues, but frankly, it's sensible to draw a line here and make very clear in terms of what the various problems are.
Thank
you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have no other questions from members. Sorry, Mr. Parker, you don't get the opportunity to come back. You only get the 3 minutes unless you're asked a specific question. So I can't take your hand up. Is there any Other questions? No. Okay, so as I said, and I'll go to the ward members. Councillor Stephen Phillips has given his apologies, but Councillor Mike Norris, would you like to speak? And then I have a statement from Councillor Pratt that I'll read out. So, Councillor Norris.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I very much support the recommendation for refusal for the reasons listed in the Planning Officer's report on pages 223 to 225, and the numerous conflicts with Mid-Suffolk's core strategy and local plan policies, and also with a number of the paragraphs of the NPPF as outlined within the pages I've just mentioned. I won't repeat them all as they're already spelt out. As we've heard, there are a number of areas where insufficient information has been provided within this application. And for an application that is well over the threshold of 150 dwellings, there's only one main access off Barking Road, shown in the indicative site concept plan on page 339, which would be at risk of flooding with an emergency vehicle access indicated at the northern end of the site, which, as we have heard, would be quite impractical, and that would need upgrading from the present level of access. These were elements of one of the primary reasons for refusal of the previous application on part of this site for 152 dwellings under reference 3506/16. SCC Highways state in their responses on pages 265 and 266 that a single access into the site is unacceptable for a development with over 150 dwellings proposed, and because the access point is within the medium flood zone where there is a history of flooding in the past, there needs to be two permanent points of access, one of which should not be in the floodplain, and they cannot accept a single access with an emergency access point for this site due to the flooding issue. And they then go on to mention other considerations such as vehicular rights of way for the proposed emergency access and pedestrian and cycle links. And they conclude by stating there is insufficient evidence to show that any mitigation proposals would adequately address the severe impact from the above points. And for this reason, the Suffolk County Council Highways would recommend that planning permission is refused on highway grounds. I also support the conclusions listed by Needham Market Town Council on pages 237 and 238 against approval of this application, including the location of the site being outside any defined settlement boundary, the adverse impact on the local infrastructure, poor accessibility, and lack of connectivity to local services and facilities. The paragraph headed Emerging Joint Local Plan Policies on 205 within the Planning Officer's report includes the statement that the application site does not form a proposed allocation within that document, i.e., it is anticipated that the needs of the district can be met over the next planned period without the development proposed. I therefore urge the committee to support the Planning Officer's recommendation for refusal of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Councillor Matheson, your hand is up. I may have missed it if it was earlier. My apologies. Did you have a question?
No, it was a question for Councillor Norris, Chair,
yeah.
So we're timely. Yeah, can you confirm that the neighbourhood plan was a Regulation 16 submission version went to the District Council in October 2020, and that this didn't include the diagram that we've been shown during the officer's presentation? In view of what Councillor Stephen Stroud has said about the possibility of an appeal, I'm asking whether we should not actually totally disregard that diagram in making our deliberations. Thank you.
Yes, has the Regulation 16 version has recently been submitted to Mid-Suffolk District Council. I can't remember off the top of my head regarding the plan that you referred to. I'm sorry, I don't know whether. Stephen Stroud could throw some light on that, or Jasmine.
I can, Councillor Norris. Yes, I'm aware that the submission is to the examining inspector is imminent, or indeed has already taken place. I haven't seen that document, but certainly in respect of the Regulation 16 consultation draft, it does make reference to the relief road. But what it's very careful to do is talk about the fact that that is a long-term sort of aim, as it were, which may come into play as housing needs may demand or dictate in the future, but certainly not something that's anticipated at this stage, and certainly not in the manner that's proposed under this application.
No, agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll now move on to the other ward member from the neighbouring area, Councillor Daniel Pratt, and I'll read his statement. As a ward member for Barking Tyre, I'd like to submit concerns raised in the representations made by members of the Parish Council and the wider community. The size of the development of 270 dwellings would add pressures of unsustainable growth in Needham Market and would compromise the boundary between Needham Market and Barking. The number of homes proposed far exceeds the amount needed to meet the total new homes required above the current land allocations for Needham Market in the emerging joint local plan. Although the development boasts 100 affordable houses, the strategic housing response highlights that the development fails to meet the needs of local population, with too much emphasis placed on larger 3-bedroom dwellings. Concerns regarding the impact of additional traffic and build-up along the B1078 and the impacts on air quality have also been raised. Also, the pedestrian footway along the B1078 linking Needham Market with Barking is currently inadequate, with narrow points and the crossings that expose pedestrians to the dangers of speeding traffic. The harm to wildlife arising from the noise, light and disturbances caused by additional traffic are likely to be understated during and after construction. Habitats found within the site includes a block of semi-natural broadland woodland on the western boundary, which sits within Barking, among other hedges, ditches and trees within the site. Concerns have also been raised on the impact of wildlife in the SSI Priestley Woods in Barking, located circa 800 metres away from the proposed development site. The bridleway BR15 could be made unsafe and unusable for walkers, cyclists and other users if large volumes of traffic were to be diverted onto it. As pointed out by the Officer for Green Access, there is very little evidence to show that it can be restricted for use in emergencies only. This is harmful and counterproductive to our aims to encourage the use of paths for active travel and recreation. The site sits in a moderate to high probability flood risk zone, and concerns have been raised around the impact of the development to flooding on the B1078. The B1078 already suffers frequent flood events in Barking. Climate change could worsen the frequency and impact of flooding at several locations on the road between Barking and Needham. This proposal does not meet the needs of residents locally, particularly to younger people needing an affordable home or to people wishing to downsize. It is totally unsympathetic to its surroundings, causing harm to natural environment, compromising access to and just read that again. It is totally unsympathetic to its surrounding, causing harm to the natural environment, and comprising access to and enjoyment of footpaths and views of woodlands and agricultural land. It is not adequately supported by schools and health services. Therefore, I request the Planning Committee to consider refusal of this application. Okay, so that's from the ward members. So it's really over to us now to discuss, debate and come to a conclusion. Councillor Matheson, your hand was up first, or was that an old hand? Then Councillor Field. Councillor Field, you're first up.
Thank you. I have to say that I do think that some of the suggestions that Needham Market lacks facilities and can't support housing growth stretches one's imagination a bit when we look at areas like Thurston that support that are a village and support vastly greater growth. Having said that, the officer's recommendations seem absolutely clear. Highways have suggested that we reject this development, and highways don't do that very frequently. The requirement for a second access, again, is totally clear. It's there. It's not been, there's sort of a vague idea that it might be possible to use a bridleway, but there's just no clarity there. Nothing's been absolutely determined. So I don't see any opportunity to do anything but go with the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. And I propose that is the action we take.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with what Councillor Field has said, and I'm more than happy to second his proposal to support the officer's recommendation for refusal on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Passmore.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to follow in behind both of the previous councillor speakers. Yes, we do need economic development growth, but it does need to be planned in the right way. This is an enormous application, and I'm afraid, having considered the arguments and heard all the points, I too am going to vote to oppose this. It's out of proportion. Yes, there might be economic gain, but there are too many questions and things that I think are flawed in this application. So I shall be supporting the recommendations of the officers to refuse it. Thank you.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. Yes, I too share the views of the three councillors who've spoken before me, but I would just like to comment that I'm a little confused by the agent or the applicant's comments that he felt that this plan had addressed the issues that we raised in the one that we determined back in 2017, when of course we didn't have a 5-year land supply, and we were concerned then that we had an access over flood ground for 152 houses. Here we have almost twice as many houses, and we've still really only got one access. Although he said, oh, we've got an emergency access, we have no guarantee, we have no details of that emergency access. And from all the information we've been given today, it looks like it is an unviable secondary access. So I have no qualms about going along with the officer's recommendation like the other councillors have already spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mayor, then Councillor Matheson. Then we'll go to the vote.
Thanks, Chair. Fully supportive of all the comments made by previous councillors. I think the report by the officer was excellent. I think the justification of the position that they're recommending is very robust, and I'm very happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Matheson.
Yes, quite agree. I just wondered whether officers would agree we should include the fact that the emerging neighbourhood plan does not favour this development. Regulation 16, etc.
Stephen, do you want to come in on that?
Yes, sure. I suppose part of the problem with that is that the neighbourhood plan is not, as of yet, part of the development plan, and is it still at an early stage of the plan making process, and the views of the examining inspector are awaited. So I think it would be unwise to place undue weight on that plan at this stage. But that's not to say that once an appeal is in, that of course, as that plan makes more progress and potentially becomes a post-examination plan, we could then seek to effectively not necessarily amend our case, but incorporate what would be a very important new material consideration that of course the inspector would have to have regard to.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so it's been proposed by Councillor Field and seconded by Councillor Muller as per the recommendation. I'm going to hand over to Robert Carmichael.
Sorry, Chair, I was having trouble getting off mute. So if members could please go to the modern.gov app and go to the plus in the top right hand corner, and then please go to the attendance and voting, and the vote will be shown in a light blue colour under the application for today, and I have started the vote.
Robert, I think we just need to be clear that if you vote for, you're voting for refusal.
Yes, just to be clear, I've worded it that application DC 20-05046 be refused as detailed in the officer recommendation.
Yeah. So you're voting for refusal or against refusal or abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The votes have now all come through, and that is a unanimous vote for refusing the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, just finishing up. We don't have any site inspection requests to be reported to committee, do we, Robert? I'm sure we don't.
No, Chair.
No. Okay, so I formally close the meeting at 13:05. Thank you very much for joining us, and can I thank those from outside of Mid Suffolk who also came along to the meeting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank